Chapter 85. Dealing with Xie Jingxing was like walking on a tightrope. This youth was young but unfathomable. Every sentence seemed to be unintentional, but it was a roundabout way of probing. That kind of dangerous feeling made her uneasy. Even though she did not treat the residents of the Marquis of Linan as the enemy of the Shin family, but the relationship between the two residences was very clear, so naturally Xie Jingxing would not have no ill feelings. Tonight's encounter, Xie Jingxing should be here to do something. He was different from the frivolous little Marquis Xie in the capital. The him in the rainy night was like a different person. Initially she only knew that Xie Jingxing had some ability, but now thinking about it, the secret of the residence of the Marquis of Linan was not simple. Her gaze landed on the table. Xie Jingxing's unfinished snacks were still on the table. If not for these, everything seemed to be a dream without a trace. But now was not the time to think about these. Xie Jingxing was not that important to her now. Tomorrow. Everything would wait until tomorrow. At the back of the mountain, the pitter-patter of rain drenched the entire mountain, and there was a group of people standing under the tree. The youth in the lead was tall and slender. The rain drenched his clothes and also his hair, but he stood like a statue and did not move at all as he looked at the foot of the mountain in a trance. After a moment, somewhere at the foot of the mountain, a small firework suddenly bloomed. Rather than saying it was a firework, it was better to say that it was a small cluster of light, and it disappeared very quickly. It was only a moment of effort before it dispersed. The youth turned around and said in a flat tone, "It is done. Young master is injured." The middle-aged man at the side frowned. He lowered his head and looked at the fresh knife wound on his arm. Just now the incense in the room was targeted at males. Once inhaled, one would be led by desire and one would gradually lose one's rationality and fall into madness. The effect on females was not that strong, as that girl had escaped a calamity. Even though his rationality was outstanding, he was not a saint and was afraid of an accident, so he could only use this method to stay awake. "Let's go back and talk. Young master." The middle-aged man was somewhat hesitant and continued to speak. "That young lady of the Shin family had seen today, Tai Yi, it is just a little girl. It is not worthwhile for me to take action." The youth's beautiful peach blossom eyes flashed and his tone was rather cold. The man was somewhat afraid of him, but after thinking about it, he still plucked up his courage and said, "But the Shin family might know." "The Shin family doesn't know." The youth coldly said, "The Shin family are all stupid. It is not easy to have a smart one." He seemed to have thought of something and smiled gently. "It is a pity." The middle-aged man moved his lips but didn't say anything in the end. "Let's go." At the same time, in the North Pavilion. In the room that was adjacent to the innermost room, Ren Wanyan sat in front of the table. She only lit a small oil lamp and the flickering flame was like her heart. Xiang Lan said, "Lady, it's already the third watch, let's rest." Ren Wanyan shook her head and there was a little irritation on her face. "Cannot sleep." She did not know why, but her heart felt uneasy and she did not know where this uneasiness came from. And Gue Momo also said that everything went smoothly. Moreover, when she left the courtyard, she could hear the sounds coming from the innermost room. In the rainy night, she could not hear it clearly, but she could hear the sound of a woman crying and struggling. Although it was not very clear, the mournful and tragic tone was very clear. When Ren Wanyan heard it, her face turned red and her heart palpitated, but she could not help but feel fear and trepidation. There had always been rumors in the capital that Prince Yu of the first rank had many ways to play with females, and now it seemed that it was indeed so. Shen Miao would definitely have to suffer a bout of torture. Even though there was some fear in her heart, there was a sense of comfort in the fear. In the third household of the Shin family, Shen Miao relied on Shen Xian's backing, and no matter what happened, the first person outside would be Shen Miao. Shen Yu was a talented female who was famous in the capital, and only Shen Qing was slightly mediocre. But she still had a son, and now that Shen Qiu was following Shen Xian, in the future he would definitely compete with Shen Yuanbo for the family property. But now, wasn't Shen Miao being played with by others? Then that eldest saw who had eyes on the top. If she knew that her daughter had done such a shameful thing, would she protect Shen Miao? Or would she give Shen Miao a piece of white silk? Chapter 86. Thinking of this, the panic in Ren Wanyun's heart lessened a little. She looked at the sky. I will rest for a while. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju saw that she was finally willing to rest and could not help but reveal a happy expression. They quickly helped Ren Wanyun to lie down on the bed and said, "Furin, rest for a while. One still need to preserve one's energy for tomorrow." Yes. Ren Wanyun muttered, one still need to preserve one's energy for tomorrow. After all, the wonderful show tomorrow was waiting for her to personally end it. This rain continued for the entire night. In the quiet mountain forest, after the rain, everything withered and became even colder after the autumn rain. The air was filled with a moist fragrance. Early in the morning, the monks in the temple started to strike the bell. The dull sound of the bell woke up the person who was sleeping soundly. Ren Wanyun opened her eyes. This night she did not sleep well and kept having nightmares. She only fell asleep when it was close to dawn, and when she woke up, her forehead was full of sweat. "Furin is awake." Xiang Lan went forward and said, "Wipe your face." After Ren Wanyun washed up, she looked outside. Outside the window, the tranquility after the rain had been restored and the birds were chirping happily. She smiled, change into a bright-colored dress. And also that ruby-inlaid emerald flower. She was now middle-aged and was long used to wearing dark-colored clothes. It was rare that she personally picked out bright clothes to wear. Kai Ju smiled, "Furin's mood is not bad. Wearing such a bright color, one would be more spirited." Ren Wanyun looked at the mirror and smiled in satisfaction. Naturally, she was in a good mood and could be said to be overjoyed. After everything was prepared, she said, "Let's go. It is time to call my tired niece to have a meal." In the innermost room of the northern pavilion, it was quiet and there was not even a maid in the courtyard. When Ren Wanyun saw it, her gaze was rather satisfied. Thinking that Prince Yu handled matters very well, even the maids were sent away. If it was not for fear of causing trouble, she would have wanted to immediately announce to the world that the person inside had lost her chastity. It was just that for the following methods, she temporarily held it back. "You go and knock on the door," she said to Xiang Lan, and a trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She also looked down on dirty women, but she had forgotten who was the one who caused Shen Miao to become like this. "Fifth young lady." Xiang Lan walked to the door and knocked. "First Furin is here." There was no sound from the other side of the door, as if there was no one there. "Fifth miss, first madam is here," Xiang Lan continued. But after knocking on the door for a long time, no one answered. Ren Wanyun sighed and said with a smile, "This fifth lady really has the temperament of a child. The sky is already bright and she is still so mischievous. It will not do if the time to burn the incense is delayed. Let me do it." She walked to the door, gently knocked on the door, and softly said, "Fifth sister, it's time to get up and eat. After eating, we still have to burn incense. Don't be willful." Still, no one in the room answered her. Ren Wanyun turned around and was somewhat helpless. She did not know if she was explaining to herself or to someone else as she softly said, "Never mind, just directly push the door open and enter. Wu Jie's maids are also ignorant, leaving without permission like this. When we get back, we must punish them properly." Finished speaking, he was about to push the door open and enter. "Second aunt." A light voice sounded in the silence. Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment and thought that the voice was coming from inside the room, but she heard Xiang Lan and Kai Ju speaking in unison, "Fifth young lady, second young lady." She turned her head back in surprise and saw Shen Yu and Shen Miao standing together. Today Shen Miao was wearing a snow-white silk dress and a moon-white cloak embroidered with peonies. At first glance, it was as if she was in mourning. To think that Shen Miao was dressed in mourning, one was used to seeing Shen Miao's bright red and green and somewhat rustic attire. This outfit was simply elegant and out of the world. Coupled with her slightly cold expression, there was a kind of moving feeling. Chapter 87. A trace of jealousy flashed in Shen Yu's eyes. She did not know when it started, but this idiot Tang younger sister's appearance was not inferior to hers. But she did not expect that Shen Miao's looks were not bad originally, but because she was deliberately dressed up in a vulgar manner, now her temperament was outstanding, and coupled with her appearance gradually maturing, naturally there was no comparison. Ren Wanyun was also dazzled by Shen Miao's dressing, and she frowned. Why is Fifth Lady dressed so inauspiciously? This white and plain, one would think that our family is having a funeral. Second Shen is wearing bright today, Shen Miao said with a light smile. Ren Wanyun looked at her own clothes and suddenly thought of something as she carefully sized up Shen Miao. She did not know why Shen Miao would come back from outside and look so calm. But last night's matter could be deceived to others but not her. She had the heart to confirm something, so she walked up to Shen Miao and pulled Shen Miao's arm with a smile before asking with concern, "Did Fifth Lady sleep well yesterday?" Thanking Second Shen for the trouble. "I slept well." Shen Miao smiled. Ren Wanyun carefully observed Shen Miao's expression and saw that it was not fake, and her heart was somewhat bewildered. When did this Shen Miao train to be able to maintain her composure? Would ordinary females not cry to the heavens and earth when they encounter this kind of matter? Why was she so calm? Could it be that it was all an act? She had clearly heard that miserable female voice last night. Looking at Shen Miao's pair of clear eyes, Ren Wanyun's heart suddenly felt uneasy, and this uneasiness made her somewhat flustered. She smiled as she leaned close to Shen Miao. "I am relieved that Fifth Lady slept well." At first glance, one would discover that Shen Miao's neck was as white as jade. She was originally born with a fair complexion, and at this moment it was like jade. There was not even a trace of stain, not to mention a scar. It was impossible. Prince Yu's methods of playing with females had always been brutal, so how could there not be any traces on Shen Miao's body? Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao and then looked at Ren Wanyun. She felt that something had happened, but she did not know what it was. Ren Wanyun's uneasiness was getting bigger and bigger. She grabbed Shen Miao's hands and said with a smile, "This weather is really cold. Is Fifth Lady not cold from wearing so thin?" As she was speaking, Ren Wanyun suddenly pulled Shen Miao's sleeves, and that white sleeves were suddenly pulled up, revealing a white wrist. His arm was white and clean, like the finest mutton fat jade. There was not a single mark on it. Ren Wanyun stood blankly on the spot. Shen Miao withdrew her hand and smiled. Second Shen seems to be inspecting something. No. Ren Wanyun forced a smile. Just now, my hand slipped a little. Her heart was somewhat absent-minded and did not know what expression to make. Why was there not a single scar on Shen Miao's body? She was an experienced person, and not to mention a person like Prince Yu, even an ordinary male would more or less leave a mark on a female's body. Could it be that Prince Yu of the first rank did not have such means on the surface? But Shen Miao's current expression did not look like she had suffered a lot of blows. But Shen Miao maintained such a nonchalant appearance. How could some things be said? Her eyes swept around and only saw Huang Ying and Qing Luan by Shen Yu's side, but did not see Jing Zhe and Gu Yu. Her eyes turned and said, "Where did the two maids beside Fifth Lady go to?" "They disappeared early in the morning. I asked them to bring some porridge over. When I woke up this morning, I felt that my throat was somewhat uncomfortable. This place is far from the kitchen." Ren Wanyun smiled. "This child, just directly say it. But isn't the kitchen in the southern pavilion?" Chapter 88. Not bad. Shen Miao looked at her. "I came over from the southern pavilion." "What nonsense are you saying to Second Shen?" Ren Wanyun smiled. "Did you not stay in the northern pavilion last night?" Before she finished speaking, she saw a smile on Shen Miao's face. Ever since she woke up from falling into the water, her expression was very cold, and most of the time it was just a smile, but now this smile seemed to come from the bottom of her heart. It was very bright, but one did not know why, but it made one's heart cold. Ren Wanyun's heart sank as if it was made of lead. "Furin, it is not good. Young lady is missing." Following the female's panicked shouts, what came into view were the two maids' anxious expressions. It was not others but Yen Mei and Shui Bai who were beside Shen Qing. What did you say? Ren Wanyan suddenly screamed. Shen Yu was slightly surprised. Shen Qing actually disappeared. She sneaked a glance at Shen Miao and the latter's expression was magnanimous and calm as if she heard a greeting. How can Qing'er disappear? Ren Wanyan grabbed Yan Mei's collar and her eyes were as fierce as a mother beast. Oh, I know about this. Shen Miao suddenly spoke. Everyone's eyes landed on her. In the silence, Shen Miao laughed softly. I just came over from the southern pavilion. Why? Naturally it is because I was resting in the southern pavilion yesterday. Last night, I really could not sleep so I went to look for eldest sister, hoping to exchange rooms with her. Eldest sister agreed and most likely felt that with second Shen staying next door, she would be more at ease. This morning I met second older sister when I went out and came over with second older sister. I wanted to thank eldest sister for being so considerate to exchange rooms with me. With every sentence she said, Ren Wanyan's heart sank a little and at the end, it was as if despair was overwhelming. The flesh on her cheeks trembled slightly and her eyes turned red, like a wild beast that was about to go crazy. Seeing Ren Wanyan like this, Shen Yu was somewhat afraid. She roughly guessed that something big had happened, but seeing that the first household who had always been secretly at odds with her mother had fallen into such a situation, naturally she rejoiced in other people's misfortune and followed Shen Miao's words, correct. Early in the morning this morning, I saw fifth younger sister walking out from the room next door and at this moment came to look for second younger sister to have a meal together. Shen Miao's voice was as light as a feather but it heavily hammered on Ren Wanyan's heart, making her so painful that she wanted to vomit blood. It wasn't me who slept here last night. It was big sister. Ren Wanyan covered her heart and took 2 steps back, almost fainting on the ground. The one who stayed here last night was not Shen Miao, but Shen Qing. Then the female that Prince Yu was playing with was her Qing'er. Those mournful and miserable cries were all made by her Qing'er. She was just next door, separated from her daughter by a wall, yet she allowed her daughter to be humiliated. This. How could she accept this? This must be fake. This was impossible. Ren Wanyan's heart was about to break. She looked at the tightly closed door and for a moment, she did not have the courage to open it. She did not dare to think and did not dare to see what kind of tragic state it would be after opening it. In the midst of the dizziness, she still remembered that she must not let Shen Yu and Shen Miao see what was inside. If it was spread out, if it was spread out. She barely squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying, you all go back first. I just asked and Qing'er is still sleeping. Let's not wait for her. Shen Miao smiled, second Shen really know how to joke. Just now one did not know that big sister was resting inside and now you said that you have spoken to big sister. Could it be that big sister is hiding something? No. Ren Wanyan flatly denied it. When this action fell into Shen Yu's eyes, she felt that it was strange. Shen Miao's eyes moved but she shouted towards another figure that was walking over, Gui Momo. May I trouble you to help second Shen open this door? Gui Momo bent her waist as she walked over. Today she was also instructed to come early and at this moment she had not clearly seen the scene in front of her. When she heard Shen Miao's words, she thought that Shen Miao had already spoken to Ren Wanyan and felt guilty. Gui Momo did not look at Ren Wanyan's face, otherwise she would be able to see that Ren Wanyan's face had turned ashen. Because Gui Momo was close to the door, it was too late for Ren Wanyan to stop her. She then heard a creak sound and the door was slowly pushed open. Everything seemed to be silent. An intriguing smell wafted out from the door. Chapter 89. The doors slowly opened but no one went forward to take a look. The rooms of Wulong Temple's pilgrims were spacious and not as gorgeous as their own residence. In addition, this room was specially selected and was even more spacious. That big bed was in the middle of the room and there was not even a screen to cover it. Because of this, everyone could see the situation in the room at a glance. Shen Yu was the first to scream. She saw the scattered clothes on the floor and it was really torn to pieces. The blanket on the bed was casually thrown to one side and the books on the table were all swept to the floor. The teapot was also broken as if it had experienced a catastrophe. However, the most surprising thing was not this. The female on the bed was lying on the bed and she was almost not covered with a quilt as she was half lying on the side of the bed. On her back, there were spots of red marks and there were also some bloodstains and bruises. It was a ghastly sight. There was also a blood-stained whip under the bed that had been split into two halves. Looking at the marks on the female's body, one could see that the whip was broken. Heavens! Shinyu covered her mouth and stepped back. Who is that? Could it be eldest sister? She suddenly turned her head to look at Ren Wanyun. Since Shin Miao said that she had exchanged rooms with Shin Qing, the one in the room at the moment should be Ren Wanyun. But everything in front of her clearly showed that something had happened to Shin Qing. Even an unmarried daughter like her knew that the scene in front of her was clearly the traces of a female being violated. Gue Momo also did not expect that there would be someone else in the room. Just now when she heard Shin Miao's words, she thought that Shin Miao had already discussed it with Ren Wanyun and was about to enter the room to talk. In the end, she was already surprised to see a female inside. Could it be that there were other females that were also played with by Prince Yu last night? If that was the case, her task would be ruined, but Shin Yu's words almost made her soul fly away. Shin Qing. The female lying inside was Shin Qing. When Yen Mei and Shui Bai saw Shin Qing like this, their hearts almost turned cold. With such a thing happening to their young lady, there was no way for them to survive. Both of them looked at each other and saw the despair in each other's eyes. They knelt down and kowtowed to Ren Wanyun. Ren Wanyun stood there blankly. "Second aunt, are you not going to let me take a look?" Shin Qing asked softly amidst the silence. Her tone was calm, as if she did not see the tragic scene in front of her. Ren Wanyun turned her head and saw the young girl looking at her quietly. Great waves rose in her chest, but she quickly suppressed it. She just quickly walked into the room with a pale face, and walked to the side of the woman who was half lying on the bed. The woman's hair was disheveled, and there were many strands of hair on the ground. It was obvious that a lot of her hair had been ripped off. Ren Wanyun shakily stretched out her hands and flipped the female over. With a loud rumble, as if to reflect her mood, the rain that had stopped suddenly fell again. Amidst the accumulated dark clouds, the sound of thunder startled everyone's ears. Ren Wanyun painfully closed her eyes. The woman in her embrace was Qin Qing. The closer he looked, the more shocked he felt. Shin Qing's face was extremely swollen. It was obvious that she had been badly abused. At this moment, there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't damaged. One of her hands was bent into a strange position, as if it had been broken. Prince Yu was too ruthless. But the person she hated the most was Shin Miao. All of this should have been added to Shin Miao, but now it was her Qing'er who suffered. To be tormented to such a state, the rest of Shin Qing's life was almost finished. She could not wait to bite Shin Miao's neck, drink Shin Miao's blood and eat Shin Miao's flesh. Ren Wanyun was after all the head of the Shin residence, so even at this time, she was able to restrain herself from going crazy. Instead, she trembled as she instructed Xiang Lan, "Go find a carriage and immediately descend the mountain." Chapter 90. But Xiang Lan looked at her fearfully. "Furin, at this moment it is raining heavily outside and one is unable to go out." The high mountains and deep valleys of Yangjing Peak were already bumpy, and with the washing of the rain, it was incomparably muddy and one was unable to move forward. If one were to forcefully go down the mountain, one feared that there would be an accident due to the slippery road. One could not go out in this kind of weather. Then what about Qing'er? Ren Wanyun finally could not hold back and screamed out loud. She gave a slap to Xiang Lan and said fiercely, "Then what about my Qing'er?" Outside the room, Shin Miao quietly watched. She stood under the eaves and looked at the rain that covered the landscape and seemed to cover some dirty tricks. The one who should be insulted like this was her. But now the one who let Shin Qing suffer such humiliation was also her. Hearing with one's own ears that her own daughter was humiliated for an entire night, she could have saved but instead stood by and did nothing. Whenever Ren Wanyan thought about it, would she feel a piercing pain in her heart? Would it be as painful as the news of Wan Yu's death? Now she wanted to bring Shenqing back to the city for treatment but had to stay here because of the heavy rain. Unable to advance or retreat, would Ren Wanyan, who was flushed with success, feel a trace of despair? Go find a doctor. No matter what method, go find a doctor. If you cannot find a doctor, then you will die here. Ren Wanyan screamed at Xiang Lan. Most likely Xiang Lan had followed Ren Wanyan for so many years but had never been reprimanded by Ren Wanyan like this before. She felt wronged and afraid as she covered her face and quickly ran out. When she ran out, she could not help but look at Shen Miao. It was obvious that everything was planned and the one who was resting here last night should be Shen Miao. How could it be so coincidental? Shenqing had never been a person who was easy to talk to, and now that she had a grudge against Shen Miao, she would not agree to change rooms with her. There was definitely something fishy about this matter. She saw that the plain-clothed young female was slender and graceful and clearly had delicate and pleasing brows, but one did not know why there was an evil aura around her. Kai Ju, go and call a few people over and close the door. Ren Wanyan said with her teeth clenched. When the door was closed, it was as if there were two worlds inside and outside the door. Shen Yu had not recovered from the shock as she looked at Shen Miao and said in disbelief, "Fifth younger sister, was eldest sister humiliated?" Shen Miao declined to comment. Prince Yu of the first rank really intended to play with the other party and left before dawn. He also understood that for a lady from a noble family, having her reputation ruined by an unknown person was the most terrifying thing. But thinking that Prince Yu was not a fool, he would be able to discover some clues soon. After all, this trick was so simple that it was a little violent. She was still immersed in the unfamiliar words and did not know that when her current appearance fell into Shen Yu's eyes, Shen Yu's heart trembled and she quivered. "Fifth younger sister, could it be that you harmed eldest sister?" Last night it was obviously Shenqing who stayed in the southern pavilion and Shen Miao who stayed in the northern pavilion, but at the end they changed positions, and after that this matter happened. If the room was not changed, the one lying there would be Shen Miao. And with Shen Yu's understanding of Shenqing would definitely not give the room to Shen Miao. Could it be that all of this was done by Shen Miao? Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao as if she was looking at something terrifying. But one heard Shen Miao lightly laugh. "Second older sister, rice can be eaten indiscriminately but words cannot be spoken indiscriminately. How would I have that kind of ability to harm eldest sister? You have overestimated me." But Shen Yu's heart was still somewhat suspicious. She did not know why, but she felt that there was something wrong with Shen Miao. And last night's matter was definitely related to Shen Miao. Chapter 91. If one has the heart to worry about these things, it is better to worry about yourself. Shen Miao said. "Me?" Shen Yu tensed up. "What about me? Do you think that after seeing eldest sister's private matter, the two maids by your side can still live?" "What?" "It seems that second older sister is really ignorant of the sinister ways of the world." Shen Miao gently smiled. "How long do you think that a servant who knows the master's secret, especially when this secret is a scandal, can live?" Huang Ying and Qing Luan, who were beside Shen Yu, suddenly turned pale. They naturally knew that in a noble family, there was no lack of dirty and shady matters. Once it was seen by the servants, the only road left for the servants was death, as only dead people could keep secrets. Shenqing was humiliated by the evildoers and the two maids saw it so naturally there was no way for her to live. Shen Yu turned pale with fright. She was just so shocked that she had forgotten about this matter. It was not that she was a sentimental person, but to groom a personal maid, one had to put in a lot of effort. If they were sacrificed in vain because of this matter, and moreover it was the two most suitable ones, how could she be willing? Not only the two of them. Shen Miao gently smiled and her eyes swept across Yan Mei, Shui Bai and Gui Momo, who were present with a meaningful gaze. None of them can escape. Gui Momo and the two maids almost fainted. What was there to be afraid of? What was there to be afraid of? When a person achieved Tao, the chickens and dogs would ascend to heaven, but if the master was not good, the servants would also not be able to escape. In the previous life, when the Shen family's property was confiscated, these unruly servants who used their power to bully others were also helping outsiders. What kind of master they followed, they would have to accept what kind of ending. Otherwise, to only injure one person at a time, would it not be overkill? She turned to leave, and when Shin Yu saw it, she quickly called out to her, "Where are you going? Did you not come to a long temple to offer incense?" Shin Miao lightly answered, "I also have many doubts and naturally have to ask Buddha." Offering incense is not considered as a wasted trip. Dressed in plain clothes, she left just like that, and the cold figure did not stop at all, as if such an earth-shattering event had not happened here today. Everything went according to plan. After a night's sleep, he went to burn some incense and pray for peace. "Not right." Shin Yu suddenly spoke, "Why are her two maids not here?" Gue Momo was also stunned. Today, when Shin Miao met Shin Yu early in the morning, she said that Jingzhe and Guyu would go to the kitchen to get some food and did not appear until now, thus she did not know about Shin Qing's situation. Now thinking about it, how could there be such a coincidence? Shin Qing and Shin Yu's maids had witnessed the scandal and could not escape, but Shin Miao's maids were not present. It was obvious that she deliberately sent them away. She had long known that something like this would happen today. She had long known that something would happen to Shin Qing. Shin Qing's current fate was orchestrated by her. Shin Yu turned her head to look and walked along the eaves, but Shin Miao's back was already gone. But those clear eyes with hidden sharpness seemed to appear in front of her, causing her to involuntarily feel a chill. At noon, the rain finally stopped. Xiang Lan ran all over the mountain but could not find a doctor. Usually, other than the occasional pilgrims, no one would pay attention to this place. When the monks in the temple fell ill, they would just grab some herbs to boil and eat. Xiang Lan could not find a doctor and could only go to the monks to ask for some calming medicinal herbs and topical medicine for Shin Qing to use. The room was filled with a strange smell of medicinal herbs, and even though it had been cleaned up, that smell still lingered for a long time. The female on the bed had her eyes closed and Ren Wanyun was sitting by the window. In just a few hours, her brows seemed to have aged by 10 years. Chapter 92. The maids in the room did not dare to make a sound. With such a big thing happening, it was difficult to guarantee that their mistress would not be angry. When Ren Wanyun was staring at the curtain in a daze, suddenly Shin Qing, who was on the bed, moved. She quickly lowered her head and called out, "Qing'er." Shin Qing opened her eyes, and when she saw Ren Wanyun, her eyes revealed a look of horror as she reached out to grab Ren Wanyun's face. "Let me go. Go away. Save me. Qing'er, I am your mother. I am your mother. Do not be afraid, mother is here." Ren Wanyun's heart felt as if it was being cut by a knife, but Shin Qing seemed to be unaware of it as she struggled with all her might and kept staring at the ceiling as she screamed crazily. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju quickly went forward to help hold her down. Shin Qing was like a crazy person without any consciousness, and Ren Wanyun did not recognize her at all. With such a struggle, all the medicine that was applied was ruined and those bloody wounds were revealed in front of Ren Wanyun. Ren Wanyun's face was filled with pain and she could not help but scream out, "Ah!" Furin. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju were shocked and afraid in their hearts. Ren Wanyun had always been one who had her own ideas and would be able to calmly deal with any big matters. In these few years, she had seen quite a lot of big winds and waves, but now she was forced to this point. The two maids who had followed Ren Wanyun for so many years could not help but be shocked. "Where is Shin Miao?" Ren Wanyun spoke aggressively. "Fifth young lady is in the temple," Kai Ju said cautiously. "Take good care of Qing'er. If anything happens to her, both of you do not need to live anymore." Ren Wanyun turned around and walked out of the door. In the Buddhist hall, a huge golden Buddha statue stood towering as it looked down on all the believers with benevolent eyes. In front of the grass, Shin Miao was kneeling on the ground with incense in her hands, but one did not know what she was thinking about. From the morning till now, she had been kneeling here for a few hours. Young lady, it is better to get up and rest. Jingzhe consoled, it is not worth it to injure one's body by kneeling. Buddha must have already seen your sincerity, and what you wish for would definitely be realized. What one wish for would definitely be realized. When Shen Miao heard that, her lips pulled out a bitter smile. What she wished for could no longer be realized. Although the mistakes of the previous life could be redone in this life, those who had already passed away in the wrong life would not come back. Her Wan Yu, her Fu Ming, did they have a chance to start over? It was likely that it had long since turned into a glimmer of light in this boundless world of mortals, leaving nothing behind. Moreover, she was not a believer. Shen Miao raised her head to look at the huge golden Buddha statue. It was just a cold statue, and it was impossible for it to really save all living beings. If the heavens had eyes, how could they let good people end up in such a miserable state? The bad guys are free and unfettered. She knelt there, offering incense stick after incense stick. She was not worshipping Buddha, but someone who had died in her previous life. Those who died because of her. Since her rebirth, she didn't have any opportunity or reason to pay respects to these people, including her non-existent children. Now that she was here, she could only use the incense in front of the Buddha to pay respects to the dead. Shen Miao. An aggressive voice suddenly burst in. Shen Miao smiled. The people of the world like to be impatient. She rubbed her sore knees and stood up. Turning her head, she looked at Ren Wanyan in front of her and said with a smile, "Second Shen." Seeing Shen Miao's smile, Ren Wanyan felt that it was even more ear-piercing. She quickly stepped forward and raised her palm to slap Shen Miao's face. Jingzhe and Guyu wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. The expected crisp sound did not appear. Shen Miao grabbed onto Ren Wanyan's arm and her palm stopped in front of her. One do not know why Second Shen is so impulsive. Even though you can discipline me on behalf of father and mother, but to hit others without any explanation, one fear that ordinary families do not have such a rule. She said. Chapter 93. Ren Wanyan did not expect that Shen Miao would actually block her slap. The young female in front of her was slender, but it was very painful to hold her arm. That Tang niece, who was originally the most obedient, easy to coax and the one who could be held in the palm of one's hand, had actually grown taller. She could no longer use the gaze that she used when she was young to look down on her. If she was not careful, she would be plotted against by this little slut who did not even blink. She put down her hand unwillingly and gritted her teeth. "Shen Miao, do not pretend to be stupid. Qing'er's matter was done by you, right?" Now that Shen Qing was not in a clear state of mind, there was no way to know how the matter came to this stage. But Ren Wanyan was also clear that if this matter was not related to Shen Miao, she would not believe even if she was beaten to death. She did not know what method Shen Miao used, but to touch Shen Qing and make her become like this, she would definitely not let it off lightly. I am also very regretful that eldest sister was harmed by evil people, but how can second Shen suspect me? Shen Miao gently smiled. After all, if eldest sister and I did not change rooms, the person who would be harmed today would be me. I am not able to do such a dangerous thing. Then the person who would be harmed today would be me. It was better if she did not say it, but when she said it, Ren Wanyan felt that her brain was jumping and hurting. She clenched her hands tightly and her eyes were like a sinister snake. That should be borne by you. It was you who let Qing'er be harmed in your place. When Jingzhe and Guyu saw Ren Wanyan like this, their hearts were shocked and angry. They were shocked that this second Furin, who had always put on a kind appearance, had shed all pretense of cordiality and was actually so cruel. They were angry that if it was not for Shen Miao's alertness last night, the three of them, master and servants, would not have a good ending today. But Ren Wanyan actually blamed it. This was simply the evil person complaining first. She did not want any face at all. Second Shen must not say that. There is still Buddha above. Shen Miao chuckled, and as her eyes moved, there seemed to be a strange light in her eyes. Everything in this world has a final conclusion. Last night the one who had an accident was not me but eldest sister. Perhaps it was also predestined. Second Shen did not blame the evildoers and did not blame the heavens but instead blame me. What kind of logic is this? Ren Wanyun was almost angered by Shen Miao to the point that people and horses almost flipped over as she sneered, "You are really eloquent. It was me who looked down on you in the past." Oh, Second Shen actually looks at me like this. Shen Miao smiled without much care. Ren Wanyun looked at Shen Miao in front of her. The plain-clothed young female had a gentle demeanor and there were signs of her delicate facial features. She had already started to lose the original immaturity and one did not know when it started, but that stupid idiot Shen Miao had completely disappeared. The Shen Miao of the past could not be found in front of this person. She had been playing politics in the inner courtyard for so many years. This was the first time she had fallen into the hands of a little girl, and she had paid such a painful price. The more graceful and graceful Shen Miao was, the more it reminded her of Shen Qing's misery as she lay on the bed. Shen Miao, if you are pretending to be confused, I might as well tell you honestly. Ren Wanyun suddenly laughed sarcastically. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, there was no need to put on a mask of kindness. She said, "Do you think this is over? Old madam won't let you off, your second uncle won't let you off, and that person will also not let you off. Your ending will definitely be tens of thousands of times more miserable than Qing'er. You will definitely be pillowed by thousands of people and forever be reduced to a slut that cannot be seen in public. Furen, be careful with your words." Jing Zhe and Guyu spoke in unison. This Ren Wanyun was the second Furen of the Shen residence and in any case Shen Gui was also part of the officialdom. Ren Wanyun usually looked amiable and noble but would actually say such vicious and vulgar curses. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were enemies. Shen Miao was still young and if her ears were to be polluted by such filthy words, how could it be? Chapter 94. Ren Wanyun then seemed to notice Jing Zhe and Gu Yu and sneered, "You even put in so much effort to protect two maids. I want to see how long you can protect them." Finishing, she looked strangely at Shen Miao before turning around and leaving with a flick of her sleeves. After Ren Wanyun left, Jing Zhe and Gu Yu looked at Shen Miao in panic. Gu Yu said worriedly, "Young lady, is it really good to shed all pretense of cordiality with her? Eventually it will be torn apart. No matter how well it is maintained on the surface, she would not have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. What is the point of doing something that is a waste of effort?" Shen Miao said. The way of survival in the harem was that if the enemy was in the light, then let them be in the light. If they were in the dark, then think of a way to let them be in the light. She did not have the mood to play a superficial game with Ren Wanyun. This game was like a storm from the beginning and Ren Wanyun had already lost her mind due to her anger. What would happen next would definitely be a crazy revenge. But after returning to the residence, old Furen would definitely favor them. Jing Zhe said softly. Old Shen Furen favored the second household the most, not only because Shen Gui was old Shen Furen's biological son, but also because Ren Wanyun gave birth to two sons for Shen Gui. Needless to say about Shen Yuanbo, the second household's eldest son who was currently in another place would also return to the Ding capital at the end of the year. With two grandsons, how could old Shen Furen not favor the second household? Moreover, when Ren Wanyun opened her mouth to please old Shen Furen till she was dizzy, no matter what she said when she returned, it was all Ren Wanyun's idea, so who would believe Shen Miao's words? So be it. I didn't expect these people to make decisions for me anyway. Shen Miao smiled. When her smile fell into Gu Yu's eyes, Gu Yu's nose turned sour and suddenly said, "If it is really so, this servant will take this matter out to threaten. If young lady has anything bad, even if this servant has to risk this life, this matter will be spread to the world." Not bad. Jing Zhe's expression also turned cold, even though this method of killing 3,000 enemies and losing 10,000 oneself is somewhat stupid, but at that time, one would not let them have an easy time. Shen Miao was somewhat stunned as she did not expect the two maids beside her to have such boldness. After being surprised for a while, she smiled. That's right, in order to protect her, Guyu admitted to the crime of stealing the imperial palace's jade wares and was executed by the crown prince of the Qin country. Jingzhe used her beauty to entice the powerful minister and willingly became a concubine and was beaten to death by the wife of that powerful minister. The two of them had always been loyal to her. It was a pity that she couldn't give them anything in her previous life. Now that he was reborn, he had to protect these girls no matter what. Some mistakes only needed to be made once. There's no need for that. I didn't intend to spread this news. Second, and won't let it spread out. Then wouldn't this matter be covered up? But after all, paper cannot wrap fire. If eldest young lady were to get married, it would naturally be discovered. Guyu was somewhat puzzled. Even if he could hide it for a while, he couldn't hide it forever. Unless Shenqing didn't marry for the rest of her life, everyone would know that she would lose her chastity once she married. So, they will definitely find a way to deceive everyone. As for how they want to deal with me, it's nothing more than asking that person for help. That person? Jingzhe questioned closely, who is that person? Naturally it is that evil person who humiliated eldest sister. Shen Miao chuckled, could it be that you all really think that last night was an accident? Jingzhe's and Guyu's body trembled. Even though they had already faintly guessed some signs, they were not willing to believe it. They did not believe that there would be someone who would harm Shen Miao like this. This method was just too vicious, to force one to a dead end. They did not believe that Shen Miao would be able to predict the future, and even more did not believe that it was the second household of the Shen family who did such a thing. Even though they knew that the people in the eastern courtyard did not have good intentions, they did not expect that it would be to such a state. This kind of method was obviously used to deal with enemies. Chapter 95. Young lady. Was it really done by second Furin? Guyu opened her mouth with difficulty. If it was just an accident, they would feel fortunate that Shen Miao escaped that night, but if it was intentional, then the second household of the Shen family could only reap what they sowed. But why would young lady say that second Furin looked for that person to help? That person did not casually find a person. Jingzhe was somewhat dizzy. If Ren Wanyan casually found someone to taint Shen Miao's innocence, now that it was a freak combination of factors, Ren Wanyan could not wait to kill that person, so why would she let that person help? Because that person is Prince Yu of the first rank. Jingzhe and Guyu sucked in a breath of cold air. The things that they did not understand before, now they seemed to understand. If that person was Prince Yu of the first rank, then everything would be clear. Previously it was seen that Prince Yu of the first rank seemed to be interested in Shen Miao, but what kind of person was Prince Yu? Ordinary females would make a detour when they saw him. If Prince Yu of the first rank had a private deal with Ren Wanyan, then Ren Wanyan would most likely help Prince Yu to humiliate Shen Miao. But now that both of them were in a freak combination of factors, if Ren Wanyan were to inform this matter to Prince Yu of the first rank, with Prince Yu's temperament, he would definitely not let Shen Miao off after being deceived under his eyelids. Young lady, now. Do you want to write a letter to Master? Guyu and Jingzhe panicked. Prince Yu of the first rank was an existence that one could not go against. Forget about power, forget about temperament, there was still the imperial family as a shield. No harm. Shen Miao's eyes strangely brightened. Shenqing is only a primer. The one that I want to deal with is Prince Yu of the first rank. She turned her head to look at the green smoke curling up from the Buddhist shrine. Wan Yua, your life is really hard. You are like a flower at such an age, but your youth is gone forever. You have the title of a princess, but you are not even comparable to grass. Mother cannot do anything for you, at least now, at least in this lifetime. Mother will help you get back at those who had bullied you. In a certain pavilion outside the Ding capital, the white-clad gentleman was playing with the porcelain cup in his hand and said curiously, so to say, that Shen family girl actually had enmity with Prince Yu? Using her own Tangjie's hands to slowly pull Prince Yu into the pit, her methods were indeed brilliant, but as a female, she was too ruthless. He shook his head with a regretful expression. Prince Yu of the first rank. The purple-clad youth opposite him smiled, and the pair of eyes on his handsome face were as sharp as a blade. He lazily said, I think that the one she wants to deal with is not Prince Yu. Not Prince Yu of the first rank. Who is that? The man in white paused and looked at the person in front of him. You think? How about using Prince Yu as the entrance to kill into the Ming-Chi imperial family? The youth lightly answered. A burst of autumn rain and a burst of cold. However, after a night of autumn rain, there was no longer any trace of summer heat. Even the rising sun in the sky seemed bleak and bleak. In the Shin residence, the eastern courtyard was still a busy scene. It was Old Furin's birthday at the end of the year, and Old Shin Furin loved extravagance and would start preparing for the birthday a few months in advance. The expenses were naturally not small, as Ren Wanyun was in charge of the money. Even though Ren Wanyun ate a lot of it, but every time it was done, it looked rather imposing. And the matter of writing the invitations and sending the wooden paper to the Furins and young ladies of the residence fell on the third household's Furin, the talented female Chinro Cho. Even though she was already middle-aged, Chinro Cho still maintained the figure of a young female. Perhaps it was the scholarly air that added a lot of bearing to her. As compared to the plump Ren Wanyun, Chinro Cho's appearance was a notch higher. It was because of her beautiful appearance, gentle temperament and her ability to recite poems that the third master of the Shin residence, Shin Wan, was completely bewitched. After being married for many years, even if Chinro Cho did not have any children and only had Shin Yu as a daughter, other than the 2 Tongfang that old Shin Furin stuffed into him, Shin Wan did not have any other concubines. Chapter 96. Among the 3 sons in the Shin residence, each had a different temperament. Shin Xian was upright and resolute but was too boorish and not attentive enough, and was somewhat loyal. Shin Gue was good at flattering and was successful in the officialdom but was greedy for money and lustful. Other than Ren Wanyun, there were a few concubines in the residence. It was just that Ren Wanyun's methods were powerful, and even though there were many concubines, there was only one Shu daughter and was not able to threaten the position of a D child. Third Master Shin Wan, on the other hand, had genuine talent and genuine knowledge. If one were to say that among the 3 sons, Shin Xian followed the old general and walked the path of a military official, Shin Gue and Shin Wan walked the path of a civil official, then compared to his second older brother, Shin Wan had some real ability. But this did not mean that Shin Wan did not have any flaws. He did not like beauties and only had Chinro Cho as his official wife, but he placed too much importance on power and only wanted to climb up. For this, he even stepped on his own superior. At this moment, Ren Wanyun was carefully writing an invitation. The sun shone through the window and slanted onto her body. It made her facial features as soft as a young female's. Shin Gue was tidying his collar and could not help but smile when he saw it. He walked to her side and hugged her from behind. Yeah. Chinro Cho rebuked, "What is master doing? It caused me to not write the words well and waste an invitation in vain." "Let me see." Shin Wan pretended to pick up the invitation to take a look and commented, "The handwriting is graceful, just like the owner of the words. How is it not written well?" Chinro Cho's pretty face blushed. When Shin Wan saw it, his mind could not help but sway. Even after so many years, this wife of his still had a kind of attractive magic that made him unable to see other females. This was Chinro Cho's brilliance. There were so many daughters in the Chin family, but only she could firmly grasp her husband's heart. It was not because of anything else but her forbearance. Whatever type of female Shin Wan liked, she would become that. One's character could be changed, one's clothes could be changed, and one could cater to one's liking. After a long time, a male would be like raising a cat or a dog and would only have one in his eyes. Second sister-in-law should be back today. Chinro Cho snuggled in Shin Wan's embrace. "One do not know if Yuer is used to the food in the temple or if the mountain roads are bumpy." Shin Wan laughed, "What are you blindly worrying about? Second sister-in-law will not let Yuer starve or freeze." Seeing that Chinro Cho still had a worried look, he said with a smile, "You always treat Yuer as a child. Now Yuer is already so big and would reach the age of marriage in a few years. What will you do then? When Yuer marries, I will naturally pick a perfect marriage for her. Since Yuer is getting married, I will pick a perfect marriage for her. That night when old Shen Furen spoke to Ren Wanyun and Chen Roqiu, she proposed to secretly give Shen Miao to Prince Yu, and as Prince Yu wished, to support the second and third household of the Shen family, Chen Roqiu told her husband about it. Shen Wan naturally agreed. He had been infatuated with power all his life, but no matter how he climbed up, his power and reputation were all inferior to Shen Xian. He was jealous of the first household for many years and did not have any feelings for Shen Miao. If Prince Yu obtained Shen Miao and was happy, he would promote him in the official circles. To Shen Wan, it would be an unexpected joy. As for Shen Miao's future, Shen Wan did not care at all if she could live well in the rest of her life. One do not know if second sister-in-law's matter is settled. Shen Wan's expression became serious. When Chen Roqiu saw it, her heart slightly sank. She knew that her husband had always placed power first. Even though Chen Roqiu did not care about the first household, but for females, it was inevitable that the fox grieves for the rabbit's death. This time Ren Wanyun suddenly mentioned to go to a long temple to offer incense, and those in the know knew that there must be some hidden reasons. One feared that after this trip up the mountain, when they return, they would hear Shen Miao's grievous news. Chapter 97. Do not worry. She said softly, Second Saw has always done things properly. This matter. It should be a foolproof plan. Hope so. Shen Gui nodded his head. Just as both of them were talking, they suddenly saw Chen Roqiu's first-ranked maid Shiqing running in with a flustered face. Furen, second Furen has brought the three young ladies back. Seeing Shiqing's expression, Chen Roqiu was much more relieved and knew that the matter was most likely successful. She smiled and looked at Shen Gui, then changed her expression to one of concern. She asked Shiqing, are the three young ladies all right? Are they tired? No. Not good. Shiqing stammered, eldest young lady has gone crazy. Chen Roqiu's smile abruptly stopped. Everything was like a dream. The orderly Shen residence was in a mess in just a short day. Shiqing had gone crazy. The second household's Ren Wanyun usually had the air of a matriarch of the household. Even though she always had a smiling face, her thunderous methods were seen by everyone. No matter how her character was, for so many years, the Shen residence did not have any problems under her management, and her ability to manage the household was recognized by everyone. However, this noble matriarch, who was always smiling calmly, for the first time revealed a tired and crazy look in front of the servants. If it was not for the maids beside her, one feared that others would have thought that she was a crazy woman that ran out of nowhere. And the young lady in her embrace was really an out-and-out lunatic. She kept screaming and struggling, and even old Shen Furen was alarmed. Even though one did not know the reason, but the fact that the eldest young lady of the Shen family had gone crazy was true. But the Shen residence was also very taboo with regards to this matter. Those maids who saw Shiqing's crazy state were all sold out. It was said that they were sold out, but who knew if they were buried in a mass grave? The two maids by Shiqing's side, the two maids by Shen Yu's side, and even Gui Momo were all locked up. As a result, only Shen Miao was unscathed. In Rongjing Tang, old Shen Furen sat on the high seat and her face was taut. Her eyes were staring at Shen Miao, who was standing in the middle, like a poisonous snake that wanted to eat people. Three perfectly fine young ladies went, and those that should have an accident did not have an accident, but those that should not have an accident had an accident. The person who was supposed to bear all this was standing here, but it was the second branch's Shiqing who had suffered. Just thinking of this matter, old Shen Furen's chest was so stuffy that it felt like a stone was stuck in it. Chen Roqiu and Shen Wan stood at one side, and Shen Yu stood by Chen Roqiu's side, feeling wronged. Her two personal maids were locked up for no reason, and previously she heard from Shen Miao that it would be very difficult to protect Huang Ying and Qing Wan. On the other side, Ren Wanyun was kneeling in front of old Shen Furen. Shen Wan had matters in court today and had not returned to the residence. The servant that invited him had not returned yet, so naturally he did not know that something had happened to his daughter. Old Furen, you must seek justice for Qing. Ren Wanyun was crying, and Shen Wan was somewhat surprised. This second Saw, who had always put on airs, was now in such a carefree manner. It was really an eye-opener, and Chen Rochio's heart was somewhat pleased. Ren Wanyun had always relied on her power to manage the family and did not put the third household in her eyes. Now that something had happened to her daughter, she could only crawl on the ground like a dog. Fifth lady, I have treated you as my own, and Qinger had given in to you in everything. You are sisters of the same blood, and not to mention mutually supporting each other, but how can you be so vicious? Do you know that Qinger's entire life was ruined by you? You have such a ruthless heart. Shen Yu told Chen Roqiu and Shen Wan about the matter of Shen Qing being humiliated, and all the servants here were expelled, so Chen Roqiu was not afraid of being heard by others. Just as Shen Miao was about to speak, she suddenly heard an angry shout from behind, "Evil girl, you poison your sister and have a heart like a snake or scorpion. You should go to jail and die without pity." Shen Miao smiled coldly and turned around to face the man who was striding over. Her second uncle, Shen Qing's father, Shen Gui. Chapter 98. Shen Gui, who was still wearing his official robe, strode into the hall. It was obvious that he had hurried over after hearing the news about Shen Qing. When Ren Wanyun saw this, she immediately cried even more miserably, "Master! Qing or Shi." The relationship between Ren Wanyun and Shen Gui was not that deep, otherwise Shen Gui would not bring concubines into the residence one after another. Even so, Shen Gui and Ren Wanyun still treated each other with respect. Not because of anything else, Ren Wanyun was able to manage the Shen residence in an orderly manner and was also able to be on good terms with the Furins of Shen Gui's colleagues. As a good wife, Shen Gui was quite satisfied with Ren Wanyun, so he would definitely not drop the face that he should give. Shen Miao. Shen Gui turned his head and looked angrily at the young female in the hall. He knew the reason why Ren Wanyun brought the 3D daughters to Wulong Temple. Bringing the 3D young ladies of the Shen residence was to prevent others from gossiping. Who would have thought that it was his daughter, Chen Qing, who was in trouble? The servant who came to pass the message secretly told him that everything was Shen Miao's doing. Even though he felt that it was inconceivable, but now he had to vent his anger on one person. Since he couldn't vent his anger on the second branch, he would push all the blame onto the first branch. You harmed your sisters with vicious methods. Since Big Brother isn't here today, I'll teach you a good lesson on behalf of Big Brother. As he spoke, he shouted, "Please punish me." Asking for domestic discipline. Chen Roqiu and Shen Gui looked at each other. Ever since Chen Roqiu married into the Shen family, she had never seen the Shen residence's family laws. Hearing from Shen Gui, those family laws were only used on Yinyang who had committed a wrong, and the descendants of the Shen residence had never used it before. The Shen family was a family of generals, so the family rules were naturally unusual. The servant very quickly carried a long wooden box over. Shen Yu was looking at it curiously, but when she saw the long wooden box open and the things inside were revealed to everyone, she could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. It was a long horsewhip. Who knew what it had been soaked in for many years? It looked black and glossy, and it was as thick as half a grown man's wrist. One look was enough to tell how strong it was. If he was hit by the whip, he would probably lose half his life. If he was more ruthless, it would be easy for him to lose his life. Not bad. Old Shen Furin was putting on airs, and when she saw her son return, she sat even straighter. She had some sincerity towards Shen Qing, and when she saw that her granddaughter met with an accident, her heart was angry. Since Shen Gui had spoken, she would naturally go with the flow. Since Wu Yue has made a mistake, as her younger brother, you should naturally teach her a lesson on behalf of your older brother. Our Chen family has always had a complete set of rules. If you make a mistake, then you must be punished by the family. Fifth girl, you should be glad that your second uncle is kind and dotes on you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as asking for the family's punishment. We will open the ancestral hall and invite the elders of the family to judge, and you will be expelled from the Chen family. Speaking till here, her gaze suddenly moved. That's right, wouldn't it be better if Shen Miao was expelled from the Shen family? Seeing old Shen Furin's expression, Chen Roqiu secretly called her a fool in her heart. If Shin Miao was expelled from the Shin residence, then with Shin Xian's character, he would definitely leave together with the first household. Although they couldn't bear to see the first branch doing well, they had to rely on the first branch for many things. This old woman's thoughts were so simple. She was really a songstress and could not be seen in public. Ren Wanyun was also startled when she heard it and more or less guessed old Shin Furin's thoughts. She did not wish for Shin Miao to be expelled from the Shin residence, not for any other reason, but because Shin Miao could not be so easily taken advantage of. She could not wait to keep Shin Miao in the Shin residence, so that there would be more ways to retaliate against Shin Miao. It was just being expelled from the family, how could it be such a simple matter? But in everyone's thoughts, one could only hear Shin Miao lightly sighing as she turned to look at Shin Gui. Chapter 99. Shin Gui was shocked by her inexplicable action and stared at her with a frown. He often put on airs in the official circles and his official prestige was not small. If it was a normal person that was stared at by him like this, one feared that the person's imposing manner would soften by 3 points. But Shin Miao did not move at all. Her expression was calm and her eyes were unperturbed, which made Shin Gui have an absurd illusion. It was as if Shin Miao was a high and mighty person and he was just a servant. This illusion was interrupted by Shin Miao's words, "Second Shu is indeed kind-hearted. Eldest sister is bedridden but second Shu is not in a hurry to check on her condition and instead is busy disciplining me on behalf of my father. Most likely second Shu really dotes on me, even more than eldest sister." When those words were spoken, everyone in the room was silent. A trace of ridicule flashed in Shin Rochio's eyes and Shin Wan frowned. Old Shin Furin's expression changed and Shin Yu opened her mouth, but Ren Wanyun lowered her head and secretly clenched her fists. If one were to talk about the 3 masters in the residence, even though Shin Xian ignored Shin Miao, he still truly doted on Shin Miao. Shin Wan cherished Shin Rochio and loved Shin Yu like a jewel. Only Shin Gui. Shin Gui was originally a greedy and lustful person and did not have any responsibility as a father. He treated his 2 sons better, but toward Shin Qing, this daughter, he did not discipline her at all. Most likely in Shin Gui's eyes, it would be best if Shin Qing could marry into a noble family in the future and add a helping hand to his power. This time when Shin Qing met with an accident, the reason why Shin Gui was so angry was not because of his heartache for his daughter's miserable experience, but because his plans were disrupted by others and he feared that Prince Yu would get angry after knowing about it. He was also angry that Shin Miao had lost a daughter who could help his career in the future. In the end, it was all about the word benefits. If it was a father who truly doted on his daughter, after knowing about the matter, he would definitely go back to visit his daughter first. How would he rush back just to discipline the instigator? As such, one felt some pity for Shin Qing. A trace of awkwardness flashed on Shin Gui's face. Shin Miao's words hit the nail on the head and he could not help but feel embarrassed. When he looked at Ren Wanyun again, she had indeed turned her head away and no longer looked at him. Shin Gui was somewhat surprised in his heart, and when he looked at Shin Miao again, there was some thought in his eyes. Just one sentence was able to separate the husband and wife. This provocation was accurate and ruthless. Shin Qing was Ren Wanyun's lifeblood, but to Shin Gui, she was just a tool that could be used. To use this matter to make the husband and wife, who had a common enemy, unhappy with each other, Shin Miao's method was clearly that of an old fox in the officialdom. The young girl in front of him had delicate features and looked extremely docile. However, for some reason, there seemed to be a faint majesty flickering around her that made people not dare to look at her directly. Suppressing the amazement in his heart, Shin Gui said angrily, "Shin Miao, you still do not know how to reflect until now. Since it is like this, if I do not teach you properly today, I would be ashamed as a son and also ashamed to face your father." He reached out to take the whip. Shin Yu stared closely at Shin Gui's actions and was somewhat rejoicing in his misfortune and also somewhat nervous. Would Shin Gui continue to fight? Shin Miao was so tyrannical, but in the face of such a scene, she could only bow her head and admit defeat. How will second uncle teach me? Using this whip to kill people to silence them? Or to beat them half to death and send them to the manor? Shen Miao suddenly opened her mouth. Shen Gui's actions froze. Shen Wan was also startled. Most likely he did not think that Shen Miao's hostility would be so heavy. Even though Shen Miao had changed these days, everyone had always felt that it was just a pretense of toughness. But now in front of the entire Shen residence, she did not even pretend and just unreservedly shed all pretenses for everyone to see. Evil female, what words are you saying? Old Shen Furin was the first to shout angrily, could it be that you want to say that your second uncle intended to murder you? This is simply going against the heavens. Chapter 100. Yes, fifth mother. How can you say that? Chen Roqiu finally opened her mouth, but she still poured oil on the fire without batting an eyelid. You harmed Xing'er, how can you put the blame on the reverse? Where did you learn this rule from? Chen Roqiu thought that if Shen Miao and the second household were both injured, then her Shenyu would be like a fish back in water in this Shen residence. After all, they were the third household and Shen Wan's power was not as great as the first household and the number of heirs was not as great as the second household. If one did not use some means, this huge Shen residence would only be taken advantage of by others. Ren Wanyan cried as she kowtowed to old Shen Furin, see, fifth lady hates us like this. She harmed Xing'er but did not repent and even wanted to tarnish master's reputation. To be this arrogant, it is obvious that she is using eldest Bo's power to bully us. Could it be that she learned this from eldest Bo? How would a young lady like fifth lady know so much? There must be someone behind her who taught her to do so. We and eldest Bo support each other, so how could eldest Bo's family treat each other like this? Ren Wanyan's tearful complaints were extremely loud and put herself in a weak position. The tougher she was usually, the weakness that she showed at this moment made others believe that what she said was true. Unfortunately, she dragged Shen Xian into it. Dragons have reverse scales and the current Shen Xian was Shen Miao's reverse scale. Her eyes swept across everyone in Rongjing Tang. They were like tigers eyeing their prey. They were one family and they could turn black into white and the dead into alive. Being surrounded by them, she was like a piece of fat meat that fell into the mouth of a hungry wolf. But what could these glib tongues do? There were so many females in the inner palace who could speak well, but how many of them were left behind and how many of them became fertilizer for the flourishing flowers in the imperial garden? Second Shen kept saying that it was I who harmed eldest sister. Then let me ask Second Shen a few questions. Can Second Shen help me dispel my doubts? Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment, and when she met Shen Miao's clear eyes, she did not know why she felt a little guilty. But when she saw the surrounding people, she was relieved. Everyone here were on her side, so what ability did Shen Miao have to reverse the universe? Ask away. She wiped her tears. All right. Shen Miao's lips hooked up, let me ask. That day Second Shen stayed next to eldest sister and was very close. If anything happened, how could Second Shen not hear it? Ren Wanyun was stunned. If eldest sister had resisted, she would have made a sound. That day, eldest sister's body was full of scars. I think she would have struggled to call for help. Second aunt was so close, why didn't she hear it? Could it be that he heard it but was too tired to come out to take a look? You. Ren Wanyun wanted to open her mouth to refute, but her palms broke out in cold sweat. Of course, maybe second aunt didn't hear the call for help at all. Why? It's naturally because big sister didn't call for help at all. Big sister, why didn't you call for help? Could it be that you know the bad guy? You are talking nonsense. This time Ren Wanyun could no longer bear it and sharply interrupted Shen Miao's words. In the end, Shen Gui and Shen Wan were men and their thoughts were not as meticulous as women. They did not think too much about the matters of the inner courtyard. But Chen Roqiu and Ren Wanyun almost immediately understood. The gaze that looked at Shen Miao was filled with fear. Naturally the former was shock and the latter was fear. Shen Miao's words were very scary. Yes, that day Ren Wanyun and Shen Qing's room were so close. If Shen Qing called for help, how could she not hear it? If she heard it, why did she not go over to take a look? Could it be that Ren Wanyun did it on purpose? Naturally Ren Wanyun would not deliberately harm her own daughter, but at that time the one who stayed there should be Shen Miao. Ren Wanyun had no reason to harm her own daughter, but it was not impossible to harm her Tang niece. Shen Miao directly said it out, and those secret plans in Ren Wanyun's heart appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 101. And the other possibility that she thought of was that Shen Qing did not call for help at all. Why was that? Could it be that it was intentional that she did not call for help after suffering such humiliation? Why was it intentional? This kind of matter, if it was a small matter, it would be that she was humiliated by the villain, and if it was a big matter, perhaps Shen Qing would be accused of having an illicit relationship with another. This world was not easy for women, and it was better to be safe than sorry. Once a rumor started, it would be very difficult to extinguish it. Shen Miao smiled gently. Second Shen, I think that there are many points of doubt in this matter. Since Second Shu is fair and reasonable, why not send me to the Yamen's Inspector General's office and have an open and honest trial? I will definitely tell everything that I know to Darren and let Darren decide. Perhaps even know who the villain is. No! Ren Wanyun and Shen Gui spoke at the same time. Ren Wanyun said no because she was afraid that there would be complications. If Shen Miao were to say those words just now, people with discerning eyes would be able to see that there was something fishy about it. There were many large families in the Ding capital, and it was alright to hide these things, but once it was spread out, it was not that no one would be able to see the truth of her murdering her cousin's niece. Moreover, if this matter was really set out, did Shen Qing still want her innocence? If those rumors and slanders were to spread, one feared that Shen Qing would use a piece of white silk to end her own life. Shen Gui said no, but it was the complete opposite of what Ren Wanyun thought. He was afraid that this matter would implicate Prince Yu. Now that Prince Yu was able to support him because of Shen Miao. Originally this matter was already messed up, as Shen Miao and Shen Qing's identity had changed. After Prince Yu knew the truth, he would definitely be furious, and if he were to be implicated in any other case and cause trouble for Prince Yu, one feared that Shen Gui's career as an official would be exceptionally difficult. Therefore, the husband and wife who were aggressive just now stopped Shen Miao's suggestion in unison. Then what else does Second Shu want to do? Shen Miao's eyes swept over the long horse whip in Shen Gui's hands and casually asked, "Still want to request for the family law?" The people in the room were silent for a moment as Shen Yu stared at Shen Miao incredulously. Even Shen Yu could see that she was threatening. As if to reflect the surprise in everyone's heart, Shen Miao laughed softly. If Second Shu were to request for the family law, there is no way, but I have always had a stubborn temperament. That scoundrel wanted me to carry a crime that does not belong to me. When father returns, I will definitely think of ways to report to the Yamen. The meaning behind her words was, today Shen Gui had hit her, and in the future when Shen Xian returned, she would definitely complain and even urge Shen Xian to go to the Yamen to complain, saying that she was the perpetrator. Who knows who she would be suing in the end? Second uncle, are you going to invite him or not? If you're going to invite him, please hurry up. Shen Miao's clear eyes were smiling, and there was a hint of ridicule in her words. After all, there are so many people and I cannot escape. Simply described Rong Jing Tang's group of people as bandits, as if in the next moment they would order people to hold Shen Miao down and beat her up. Shen Gui had never thought that in the officialdom, he was able to speak the language of people and speak the language of ghosts. He thought that he would be able to deal with any situation like a fish in water, but he did not expect that he would be threatened by his own niece. It was not that he could not think of a way to deal with it, but Shen Miao did not give him a chance to react from the beginning to the end. It was Shen Miao who was speaking, and the more it went on, the sharper and more aggressive her words made one unable to avoid it. There was a flash of surprise in Shen Wan's eyes. This second older brother of his was a wily old fox in the court, and even those political enemies had not forced him into such a difficult situation before. And the one who forced him into such a situation was just a 14-year-old young lady. Was the first household really so indestructible? Shen Wan's eyes darkened. Chapter 102. You. Shen Gui's face was somewhat red. Today he did it in a moment of anger, and in his heart, Shen Miao was still that yes-man and gullible niece. Even if she was beaten and was really punished by the family laws, she would not dare to speak of today's matter. Who knew that Shen Miao would change, and one did not know when she became such a thorn. Not only did she not submit to adversity, she even counterattacked him and made him unable to step down. If he was not afraid of Shen Xian, Shen Gui really wished that he could kill Shen Miao right now. Old Shen Furen, who had been sitting in the hall, silently saw that her son was forced to such a situation, and a trace of anger flashed in her eyes when she looked at Shen Miao. She then suppressed it and said in a deep voice, "Enough." The hall became solemn again and Shen Gui sighed in relief. Everyone looked towards old Shen Furen. Even though old Shen Furen did not know anything about the court and foreign affairs, she was an expert in the battles in the inner courtyard. Shen Miao's sharpness in dealing with Shen Gui and wife made her unable to help but cast sidelong glances. However, the more intelligent Shen Miao was, the more venomous her heart was. It was just that Shen Miao now held Shen Qing's reputation in her hands and could even threaten Shen Gui. This made old Shen Furen not dare to act rashly. She coldly said, "Fifth girl, your second shoe's words are reasonable. It is just that the family laws can be passed off as you are still young. But this matter can be considered to have started because of you. Since eldest girl has suffered for you, you should go to the ancestral hall to kneel and atone for your eldest sister's crimes. From today onwards, you will be grounded. You will kneel in the ancestral hall and copy Buddhist scriptures. Only when eldest girl is better, then you can come out." She actually had the intention to lock Shen Miao up. Shen Yu was somewhat disappointed when she heard it. She still wanted to see Shen Miao being beaten by the family laws until she could not get off the bed or be banished from the family. Who knew that it was just a superficial confinement? One had to know that when Shen Xian returned in a few months, Shen Miao's confinement would naturally be lifted, and at that time everything would be the same as before. Ren Wanyun was also somewhat dissatisfied, but Shen Miao's words just now shocked her to the point that she did not dare to act rashly. At this moment her heart was in a mess and could not think of a better way. Even though she had some complaints about old Shen Furen's words, she knew that it was an expedient measure and did not say anything. "Oh." Shen Miao's voice was slightly dragged out. Her tone was clearly extremely gentle, but for some unknown reason, it gave off a feeling of hundreds and thousands of twists and turns. She said, "I know. I will atone for my sister in front of Buddha." Now every sentence that Shen Miao said seemed to have other meanings, and Ren Wanyun could not help but have a layer of goosebumps. She didn't know what to say, so she covered her face and sobbed again. All right. Old Shen Furen was also rather impatient. Today she did not manage to grasp Shen Miao, and it made her heart feel like it was blocked by a stone. Looking at Ren Wanyun's crying appearance, her heart was even more vexed. He then said, "Lao bring your wife out. Rong Jingtang is crying all day, what is he doing? All of you, get out. Fifth girl, go to the ancestral hall and kneel now. Don't eat today." Everyone took their leave, and Shen Miao did not haggle over the matter too much. After leaving Rong Jingtang, she headed towards the western courtyard. But she did not know that behind her, everyone's eyes were on her. Shen Wan said solemnly, "Fifth mother has really grown up." "Yes." Chen Rochio's lips hooked up, "This time fifth mother is really an eye-opener." "Mother." Shen Yu spoke softly, "Fifth younger sister is somewhat scary." Her unperturbed expression in Wulong Temple made Shen Qing suffer such a loss and still able to escape unscathed. Even Shen Yu felt a trace of fear. She did not know when that good-to-talk and stupid Tang younger sister had such ability. Chapter 103. What is Yuer afraid of? Shen Wan caressed Shen Yu's head. It was clearly a loving expression, but the words that came out were gloomy, just a little girl who does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sooner or later she will pay the price. Shen Miao really entered the Shen family's ancestral hall as old Shen Furen had arranged. The Shen family was a military family, and the ancestral hall was dedicated to their ancestors. These ancestors had laid down such a prosperous family business for the Shen family on horseback. Unfortunately, in this generation, the Shen family was also united in appearance, but divided in heart, and was not far from decline. Old General Shen's branch was initially very prosperous. Unfortunately, in a war, the few brothers of the Shen family were all killed in battle and only old General Shen managed to escape alive. Old General Shen gave birth to 3 sons, but only one of them took the path of a military general. Now on the surface the Shen residence still inherited its original glory, but other than that formidable great General Shen Xian, it was an out-and-out scholarly family, which was quite ironic. "Is young lady Num from kneeling?" Gu Yu asked. Jing Zhe and Gu Yu also followed into the ancestral hall. Shen Miao was worried that Ren Wanyun would do something behind her back. Previously in Wulong Temple, she had deliberately sent Jing Zhe and Gu Yu away so that both of them could escape the fate of being silenced. But in the huge Shen residence, everyone had their own ulterior motives, so it was better to leave it by one side. Ren Wanyun's hands were too long and would not dare to make a move in front of her. "Even if it is not Num, the humidity in this place is heavy." Jing Zhe looked at the little window grumpily. "Now it is raining and the ground is wet. Kneeling like this will cause the root of the illness. Moreover, they are simply being unreasonable. What does this matter have to do with young lady? The guilty ones are the first to complain. When master returns, see if they still dare to speak less." Gu Yu reprimanded. "If it is discovered by others, the one to suffer would be young lady." Shen Miao smiled and did not care. Jing Zhe thought about it and asked again, but today was considered unexpected. So many of them went to Rongjing Tang, but there was not a single person by young lady's side and came out unscathed. Even though kneeling in the ancestral hall is terrible, it is much better than what this servant thought. Before entering Rongjing Tang to denounce, Shen Miao did not bring her maids in. Thus Shen Miao's maids did not know what was happening inside. "Young lady must have convinced the entire house of people," Liu said with admiration, "not afraid even when facing so many people. Young lady is now more and more like master's demeanor." So many people? Shen Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. It was just a small Shen residence and just a bunch of clowns that could not be seen in public. At the beginning, when Fu Xiuyi wanted to change the crown prince, all the officials stood on the side of Mei Furen and Fu Sheng. Her Fu Ming was almost under house arrest at that time, and she wore the Empress court dress and faced the officials in the throne room, arguing with them, and every word she said was filled with tears of blood. How weak was the power of one person! She was the noblest woman in the world, and she had married the noblest man in the world, but she couldn't even protect what her son deserved. No one stood beside her, and she could not retreat, because there were people to protect. It was precisely because she had failed to protect the precious person that she was using even more violent methods this time. Cruel? Heartless? Hypocrisy? Cunning? It did not matter. As long as the tip of the blade was aimed at the enemy, as long as the enemy was the one who fell, even if the process was more cruel, she alone would block the sin. So what? She closed her eyes and the ancestral tablets were in front of her. Shen Miao softly said, "The ancestors on horseback, if your spirits are still alive, please bestow me the sharpest arrows and the fastest horses. Please bless me to kill my enemies with my own hands." Chapter 104. When she finished reading, she opened her eyes and saw Jing Zhe looking at her with blinking eyes. She took out a packet of snacks from her bosom and smiled. "Young lady has been hungry for so long, it is not good to not eat something. This servant still has some snacks that young lady can fill your stomach with." Shen Miao would not really fast just because of old Shen Furen's orders. She took the paper bag and opened it to take a look and could not help but be surprised. This is what this servant found in young lady's room in Wulong Temple. Jing Zhe scratched her head and said embarrassedly, "At that time young lady bestowed the snacks to this servant, and after this servant tasted one piece, this servant had never eaten such delicious snacks before and could not bear to finish it. After returning to the residence and young lady went to the ancestral hall, one did not have time to take food from outside and only these were left." Shen Miao looked at the exquisite snacks that were left behind when Xie Jingxing talked with her at night. Thinking of this, it was as if she could see that youth's handsome face in the rain and that mysterious identity. Xie Jingxing. Shen Miao muttered to herself, what kind of person was he? In Kai Yun Yuan. The physician had just left and Shen Qing, who had drunk the tranquilizer, had already fallen asleep. Even after seeing it several times, Ren Wanyun could not help but feel as if a knife was twisting in her heart every time she saw the scars on Shen Qing's body. That physician was one of their own, so naturally he would not say it out, and he also clearly told Ren Wanyun that Shen Qing's injuries were too serious and her mind was not clear, so one would need to recuperate for a few days. As for why she was not conscious, naturally it was because she was scared to this state. Ren Wanyun dared not think about what kind of torture Shen Qing had suffered that night. That night she stayed next to Shen Qing and even heard Shen Qing's cry for help, but she thought that it was Shen Miao and did not move forward. In the end, her daughter was defiled. Just thinking of these, Ren Wanyun's heart and intestines would move. Shen Gui glanced at Shen Qing, who was lying on the bed and seemed to feel a headache before turning to leave. "Stop!" Ren Wanyun called out to him. "Qing'er has now become like this. Do you still want to go to those vixens' courtyard?" Shen Gui was lustful and had several concubines in the room, each of them were beautiful and gentle. Ren Wanyun was powerful and managed to tame these concubines. Even though Shen Gui was lustful, he knew that only Ren Wanyun could make his official path smoother and things would not happen, so Ren Wanyun was too lazy to care about him. Men were all the same. A concubine was just a plaything, so why should she bother with a plaything? But today, she was behaving strangely. Can you not be so unreasonable? Shen Gui was somewhat irritated. Today he was rendered speechless by his own niece and he did not know what would happen on Prince Yu's side in the future. Would he vent his anger on him? Thinking of these, Shen Gui was extremely vexed, and at this time when he saw Shen Qing, it added fuel to the fire. His tone was a little impatient. "It's useless for me to stay here. Why don't you let me have some peace and think about what to do next?" Think. Ren Wanyun changed from her usual character of looking at the big picture and screamed, "You only know how to think. What is Qing'er in your eyes? She has now become like this, but you as a father are indifferent and do not care about anything. In your heart, one fear that there is no Qing'er, this daughter. How can there be such a vicious father like you in this world?" When the words were spoken, Ren Wanyun's two personal maids, Xiang Lan and Kai Ju, were stunned. Normally Ren Wanyun was able to remain calm and composed. Even if something happened to Shen Qing in Wulong Temple, she would still be able to hold on and focus on the big picture. As for Shen Gui, she had never said any harsh words. For such a rational and slick person like Ren Wanyun to quarrel with Shen Gui like a shrew, it was really unbelievable. Chapter 105. Ren Wanyun also did not know why she was like this. Seeing Shen Gui's appearance, the words that Shen Miao said in Rongjing Tang previously echoed in her ears. When Shen Gui knew that something happened to Shen Qing, the first thing that he thought of was not to check on Shen Qing's injuries but to discipline Shen Miao. This was not what a real father would do. Shen Gui did not care about this daughter's life or death. Perhaps to Shen Gui, Shen Qing was just a valuable object. In the past, because of its value, he was willing to raise it, but now that there was no value, he was not even willing to take a look at it. Shen Miao's provocation had little effect in Rongjing Tang, but after accumulating till now, it exploded. "You vixen!" Shen Gui was now often flattered in the officialdom, and when would there be a time where he was pointed at and scolded? Even though he was angry in his heart, he knew that he could not completely fall out with Ren Wanyun, so he sneered, "You say that I am not a good father, but have you ever been a good mother? It was you who brought Qing'er to Wulong Temple and should be taken care of by you. You were right by her side, but you let something happen to her right under your nose. Did you not sleep next to her that night? If you really love her, how could you not discover that Qing'er was the one who had an accident at such a short distance?" When the words were said, Ren Wanyun was immediately stunned. What she regretted the most and hated the most was that night in the northern pavilion. She obviously heard the cries for help and had the chance to save her daughter, but by a freak combination of factors, Shen Qing had an accident. Now Shen Gui was stabbing a knife into her heart and sprinkling salt on the wound, causing her to stand rooted to the ground. When Shen Gui saw that she did not speak, He coldly snorted and flicked his sleeves and left, not knowing which concubine's courtyard he went to. Ren Wanyun stood there blankly for a moment before her legs softened and she collapsed to the ground. She covered her face and cried softly. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju were afraid and shocked as they had never seen their mistress like this. The current Ren Wanyun was as if all her support had collapsed in one night and she was utterly defeated. There was no longer any trace of the previous flush of success. The two maids could only go forward to comfort her. One did not know how long she cried before Ren Wanyun wiped her eyes and stood up again. She said, "Bring a brush and paper. I want to write a letter to Yuan." Shin Yuan was the eldest son of the second household, Ren Wanyun's eldest son. Currently he was in the Lu province and once his term was up, he would return to the capital to be an official in the Ding capital. If one were to say that in the third household, Shin Yu was the proudest, then in the second household, Shin Yuan Bo was young and Shin Qing's aptitude was not good, but this Shin Yuan was blessed by the heavens. At such a young age, he was able to obtain scholarly honors and did things well. Shin Gui would be a good job. Father is unreliable but there is always Shin. Ren Wanyun glanced at Shin Qing who was sleeping on the bed and gritted her teeth. "Yuan loves you the most, this younger sister. Shin Miao, that little slut, this time I will make you regret your actions for the rest of your life." Not said. Xiang Lan quickly ran and Ren Qing to Ju. Wanyun Xian Shin Qing, Shin Yuan was, Shen, Shin Shin Qing Shin Qing Qing, Huan Mama, Qing, Shi Shin Shin Qing Mu, Shen, Gui, Qing, Wan Chang emotion of Wanyun Shin Yuan, Gui, Shen, Wan Fu is Shin Yuan, Shen. These maids were naturally the ones who had witnessed Shin Qing's mishap at that time. There were Shin Qing's maids Yan Mei and Shui Bai, Shin Yu's maids Qing Luan and Huang Ying, and there was also Gui Momo. Shin Yu's maid was fed with mute medicine and returned to Qiu Shui Yuan. Chen Ro Qiu can decide how to deal with it. Qing's two maids. Ren Wanyun said fiercely, "Sell them to a 9th rank brothel. If they die like this, wouldn't it be letting the two of them off for nothing? Not being able to protect your master is an unforgivable crime." Chapter 106. Kai Ju could not help but shudder. The brothel and the brothel were not the same. The ladies in the brothel could choose to sell their skills or their bodies, but the ladies in the brothel were all in the flesh business. The 9th class brothels were the lowest class among all the brothels. The people who worked there received the most rude and inferior people. Because they worked as laborers, those people naturally couldn't be said to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. Some of them were even extremely rough. And the ladies could not stop receiving guests all day long. From morning to night, the money that they received would not belong to them and would be directly handed over to their mother. If one day they got venereal disease, they would not even be able to take medicine. They would find a mat and throw it out. It was very common for them to freeze to death, starve to death or be bitten to death by dogs. So generally, the people who were sold to the 9th ranked brothel were either servants who had committed heinous crimes or had enmity with the master. But Yan Mei and Shui Bai had been by Shin Qing's side since they were young and had worked hard for so many years. Who knew that they would end up like this? This servant will save it. Then Gui Momo. Kai Ju asked tentatively. Gui Momo had long pledged her loyalty to them, so she could be considered as Kai Yun Yuan's people. Gui Momo. Ren Wanyun lowered her head and sneered, "I do not know what happened that night. Now that I think about it, I have to meet Gui Momo. After all, she is the one who knows the ins and outs of the matter." In the abandoned woodshed, there was a smell of decay everywhere. Because it had been raining for a few days, there was even green moss growing on the ground. If it was a normal day, it would appear quiet, but in the darkness here, it seemed somewhat strange. This woodshed had locked up countless people. Those people were all people who had committed mistakes in the Shin residence. There were masters and servants. These people did not have a good ending, and the common point was that after being locked up here for a while, they would quietly disappear from the Shin residence, as if they had never appeared in this world. At this moment in the woodshed, there were some strange sounds. It seemed that someone was struggling and kicked something, and there were also suppressed cries. The lantern was casually placed to the side, illuminating the woodshed. Under the dim yellow light, the woodshed seemed even more eerie. Two tall old maids were grabbing the necks of two maids and pouring the contents of the bottles into the mouths of the maids. The two maids kept struggling, but their thin bodies were like chicks in the hands of the old maid, and their chins were blocked so that they could not spit out the things in their mouths. After a long time, the two maids finally stopped struggling and covered their necks with painful expressions. "Drag them out," the old maid ordered the manservant behind her. Two manservants came in and dragged the two girls out. "These two," the old maid pointed at the other two maids, "drag them out too. But madam has specially told us to take good care of them. They will be sold to that place anyway. If you want, you can do whatever you want." When the two servants heard this, they revealed looks of desire. When they looked at the two maids again, there was only despair left on their faces. Seeing that they were almost done, the two old maids got up and were about to go out. "Madam, did madam say what I should do?" A figure suddenly jumped out from the dark corner and hugged the leg of one of the old maids. What should this old servant do? That person was none other than Gue Momo. "Momo, do not be anxious." That old maid pulled Gue Momo's hand away from her leg and said in a strange tone, "Since madam values Momo so much, she must have made plans for Momo. Just wait and see." After that, he left without looking back. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness again. Gue Momo shrank in the corner with an expression of extreme fear. No one was willing to die and she wanted to live. Chapter 107. In the gloomy woodshed, there were occasional sounds of mice crawling in the darkness, as if they were gnawing on the firewood. Coupled with the movements in the night, it made one's heart feel cold. Gue Momo was alone in the corner. Even though she was only a Momo for so many years, but because she had face in front of Shin Miao, the second and third household were willing to give her some face, so she was considered to be doing well in the Shin residence. Sometimes Gue Momo's life was more comfortable than those commoners and wealthy families. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. She was not used to hard days, not to mention being locked up in the woodshed like those lowly maids. Her thin clothes were unable to withstand the cold of the night, but what was colder than her body was her heart. Gue Momo's heart was very fearful of the four maids that were locked up together. Shin Yu's maids were given mute drugs, and one did not know if they could survive. Shin Qing's maids were directly sold to a 9th-rank brothel. Ren Wanyun's methods were so ruthless that she could not help but worry about her own fate. Gue Momo did not think that Ren Wanyun would let her off easily. Because she not only witnessed Shin Qing's scandal, but also played an important role in this matter. The one who should have been harmed was Shin Miao, but in the end it was Shin Qing who was defiled. How would Ren Wanyun let her off so easily? Da. Just as she was thinking, there was a sudden sound of footsteps coming from outside, and it was especially clear in the night. Gue Momo's body stiffened, and in the darkness, she looked fearfully at the direction of the door. It seemed to be hope and also despair. What was behind the door? Was it the person that Ren Wanyun sent to silence her? Or perhaps she still had a trace of life. The footsteps were not fast nor slow, but it was like a death warrant that struck Gue Momo's heart. Her plump body had long turned into a pile of mud, and her forehead was sweating profusely, and her body seemed to be swaying. Jia, the door was pushed open. The person who came was carrying a green lantern. The color of the lantern was somewhat strange, and in this place, it was like a demon demanding for one's life. Gue Momo tremblingly raised her head and saw a person in a white cloak standing at the door. She walked in and slowly closed the door. There was only the green lantern in the room, emitting a ghostly light. The person who came finally loosened her cloak, revealing a delicate and fair face. It was Shin Miao. The young girl's figure was slender, and her round and gentle facial features were illuminated by the green light, making her look even more strange. It was precisely because of the carefree expression on his face that made him seem even more like a soul-reaping emissary who had walked out of hell, causing people to actually not dare to look directly at him. Gue Momo was stunned for a moment before suddenly calling out in surprise, "Young lady." Shen Miao placed the lantern on the ground and walked unhurriedly to Gue Momo before squatting down and smiled gently, "Is Momo all right?" "Miss, you're here." This old servant knew that Miss would definitely come to save this old servant. Miss has always been kind-hearted and will definitely not sit idly by and ignore this old servant. It was as if Gue Momo had grabbed onto a life-saving straw as she desperately grabbed onto the corner of Shen Miao's skirt. Tears flowed down her aged face as if she had suffered 120 grievances and Shen Miao was her most trusted relative. Shen Miao swept a glance at Gue Momo's hand that was tightly grabbing onto the corner of her skirt and smiled gently. It seems that Gue Momo had suffered a lot of hardships here. Gue Momo was startled for a moment before carefully looking at Shen Miao's expression. Shen Miao's smile was gentle and her appearance was considered calm, but there was no ripple at all in the face of Gue Momo's words. Gue Momo was shocked to discover that this young lady whom she had accompanied for so many years, could not see what Shen Miao was thinking at all. She said, "This old servant has served young lady all my life and is loyal to young lady." On that day in Wulong Temple, this old servant accidentally saw it. "Young lady, this old servant is innocent." Chapter 108. It seems that Gue Momo really see me as a hope. Shen Miao said worriedly, "But how can I save you? In this residence, will anyone listen to my words? What ability do I have to reject the Eastern Courtyard's orders? No, young lady will definitely have a way." Gue Momo became anxious when she heard it. Even though she knew that what Shen Miao said was reasonable, in the entire Shen residence, the second and third household only had a good relationship with the first household on the surface. Shen Xian and wife were not in the Ding capital all year round, so it was impossible for Shen Miao to be of any use by herself. But everyone had a desire to live and Gue Momo could only grab hold of Shen Miao, so she was not willing to give up. She said, "Young lady can go and beg old Furen. If it is really not possible, young lady can write a letter to master and let master reply to the residents. They will not disobey master's words." Seemingly feeling that she had found an excellent way, Gue Momo's eyes lit up and looked at Shen Miao with hope. But she saw Shen Miao chuckling softly and shaking her head. Looking at her, she slowly said, "Father's words can indeed save you, but on what basis?" Gue Momo was stunned. "On what basis do I have to spend so much effort running around here and there for a servant?" Her voice seemed to contain a touch of ridicule and under the sparkling lights, it was as if she did not put the person in front of her in her eyes at all. Gue Momo suddenly panicked. She did not expect that Shen Miao would actually say such words. She watched Shen Miao grow up and the reason why she was cold to her in the past few days was because of a child's temper. Gue Momo knew that Shen Miao was soft-hearted and that day in Wulong Temple, she even had a heart-to-heart talk with her. It was obvious that she wanted to put her in an important position again. Why did she change her face now? Could it be that someone said something in front of Shen Miao? Gue Momo's heart moved. It must be those two maids, Gu Yu and Jing Zhe, who said it. They had always liked to go against her and now that she was in prison, those two maids would definitely hit her when she was down and say something in front of Shen Miao. She panicked and said, "Miss, I've been with you for so long. I've watched you grow up since you were born. It's been so many years, but master and madam are often not around. It's only me and you who depend on each other." Speaking up to this point, she even choked a little as if she was extremely sad. "Miss, you also said that you had a fever at night, but the doctor didn't come for a long time. I braved the rain to find a doctor for you, and because of that, I fell ill." His every word was recounting the friendship of the past. As Gue Momo spoke, her eyes glanced at Shen Miao. The people of the first household of the Shen family, no matter if it was Shen Xian and wife or the Shen siblings, they were all extremely grateful. Perhaps this was the inheritance of a military family, to know how to repay kindness. Now Gue Momo was also using kindness to seek repayment, hoping that it would move Shen Miao. However, in the light, the girl lowered her head and smiled faintly. She did not look moved at all, as if she was listening to an interesting story. She softly said, "Gue Momo originally treated me well. Then how do I, the first household of the Shin family, treat Gue Momo?" Gue Momo hesitated for a moment but still said, "Foreign and master treated this old servant very well and young lady also treated this old servant very well. Both inside and outside gave this old servant enough face and the monthly allowance was also very generous. Towards this old servant was not scolded at all. Not only that. Shen Miao continued her words, your son, your grandson. Whatever that can be helped, I have helped. In the entire western courtyard, you are the biggest. I did not treat you as my own Momo but treated you as a relative. I trust you, get close to you and think of you in everything. Do you not agree?" "Yes," Gue Momo said. Indeed, because Shen Miao was young and easy to coax, she was able to coax Shen Miao until she was obedient. Whatever she said, Shen Miao would believe it. In the western courtyard, she could almost be considered as half a master. Chapter 109. Then why did you betray me when I treated you so well? A light sentence almost made Gue Momo, who was immersed in her memories, to be scared out of her wits. She looked up at Shen Miao and said in shock, "What?" Momo need not show such a shocked expression. Shen Miao smiled. "At the beginning when I knew that Momo had the heart to betray one's mistress, I was 1,000 times, 10,000 times more surprised than Momo. Young lady, there must be someone instigating. This old servant had never betrayed young lady before. How could this old servant betray young lady? Young lady must believe this old servant." Gue Momo's reaction was very fast and after a short moment of panic, she put on an extremely wronged look and shouted the injustice louder than the heavens, trying to prove her loyalty. "Enough." Shen Miao waved her hands and there was a little impatience on her face. In Wulong Temple, there is aphrodisiac incense in the vegetarian food. Second Shen's methods have always been brilliant. To invite Momo to do things, she really treated Momo as her confidant. She said it word by word and when she reached the last word, Gue Momo, who wanted to defend herself from the start, was unable to say a single word. She looked at Shen Miao blankly with an inexplicable horror in her eyes. Momo most likely is illiterate and do not know that there is a phrase called the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Momo is also a person who had served 2 masters before. I also want to hear, in Momo's eyes, is Second Shen's methods more brilliant or am I better? Could it be that you? Gue Momo spat out a few words with difficulty. Not bad. It is me. Shen Miao's voice was very low, so low that only Gue Momo could hear it. She said, the person who should be defiled was me. Why did it become eldest sister at the end? Naturally it was not a coincidence. It was all done by me. Guessing it was one thing and hearing it with one's own ears was another. Gue Momo looked at the young female in front of her in fear. She was half squatting on the ground and looking at herself with a smile. That clear eyes were like the eyes of a wild beast under the jade-green light. It was extraordinarily bright in the dark and also extraordinarily frightening. It was clearly a well-behaved and tender appearance, so how could it be so scary? Regarding Shen Miao and Shen Qing's change in person, Gue Momo had been thinking about this after being thrown into the woodshed. She also guessed that it could be Shen Miao's actions but she quickly dispelled this absurd thought. She had watched Shen Miao grow up and Gue Momo was very familiar with her capabilities. She was originally and soft-hearted and she would not be able to do it. Now Shen Miao had personally admitted it in front of her and did not even try to cover it up. If it was someone else, Gue Momo would feel that this person was too arrogant and stupid but now she no longer dared to look at Shen Miao with an ordinary gaze. Miss. She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. Shen. She did not know what. Momo of Ren Gue. Gue Shen. And Shen, of and was Shen of Mo of Shen was that she was Shen of Shen, of Gue Momo was fearful of Ren Wanyun's methods and Shen Miao's words ignited the hope in her heart. She knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing to Shin Miao. Young lady, save this old servant this time. This old servant did not mean to harm young lady. Second Furin used this old servant's grandchildren to threaten this old servant, and this old servant was forced. Young lady, look at master and Furin sake, and this old servant had served young lady for more than 10 years. Please save this old servant. She knocked her head on the ground. If it was in the past, with Shin Miao's respect for her, she would not let Gue Momo bend her back like this. But now, she was the Empress Shin of Ming Qi, and all the civil and military officials had knelt before her. She could really afford to be a servant who betrayed her master. Chapter 110. Actually, the reason why I came here tonight is to repay Gue Momo's kindness for so many years, Shin Miao suddenly said. When Gue Momo heard it, she was overjoyed and said loudly, this old servant knew that young lady is a kind person and is so sentimental and righteous. In the future, Bodhisattva will bless young lady with a smooth life, and those who want to harm young lady will all die a horrible death. Shin Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. Gue Momo's fence-sitter was really amazing. She also raised her voice. Actually, it is not only to repay these. That day in Wulong Temple, didn't Gue Momo open her heart to me? From then on, I knew that in this world, Gue Momo would really treat me well. Gue Momo was somewhat at a loss, as she did not know what Shin Miao meant by saying all these. Just now she obviously hated her so much, but why was she comforting in a turn of the head? No matter what, Gue Momo felt that she was full of hope and immediately replied to Shin Miao's words, yes, this old servant is standing on young lady's side from the beginning to the end. Only young lady is this old servant's master, and this old servant will definitely be loyal to young lady for a lifetime. Suddenly a strange sound was heard from outside the window, as if something had been hit. Gue Momo jumped in shock and immediately looked outside, but how could she see anything in the dark room? She could not see anything and turned her head to look at Shin Miao with a miserable expression. Can young lady get this old servant out now? It is too dark and humid here. This old servant's arms and legs will not be able to support for long. Do not be afraid. You do not need to support for long. Anyway, you are going to die soon. What? Gue Momo suddenly raised her head and looked at Shin Miao in a daze. This old servant does not understand young lady's meaning. Just now the people outside were sent by Second Shin, and it seems that they have already discovered that I am here to visit Gue Momo. Shin Miao smiled. As such, what path does Gue Momo have to live? This old servant does not understand. Gue Momo subconsciously straightened her body. She felt a faint uneasiness in her heart but did not know what Shin Miao meant. Do not understand? Shin Miao tilted her head and pondered for a moment. Do you still remember what Momo said loudly just now? When Gue Momo heard it, she really thought about it and her expression changed and instantly turned pale. She had just said loudly, from the beginning to the end, I stood on Shin Miao's side and only Shin Miao was her master. Admittedly, these words were said to deceive Shin Miao and to express her loyalty, hoping that Shin Miao would be able to save her. But if Renwan Yun's people heard this, what would they think? That day when Shin Qing inexplicably changed positions with Shin Miao, she already suspected that Shin Miao had done something to it. The reason why she did not dare to believe it was because she did not know how Shin Miao could predict the future. But what if Gue Momo told this matter to Shin Miao and conspired with Shin Miao to scheme against Shin Qing? Everything made sense. This was not the truth, but in Renwan Yun's ears, this was the truth. Before there was time to be afraid, Shin Miao had already opened her mouth again and said softly, I want to repay Momo with this big gift. Does Momo feel that it is good? Gue Momo stared at Shin Miao. She only discovered at this time that she was led by the nose by Shin Miao from the beginning to the end. Whatever Shin Miao said, she would believe it, and the relationship between her and Shin Miao had already changed. But Shin Miao was more unpredictable than her and would turn hostile anytime, and she could not guess what was Shin Miao's motive at all. I only have one purpose, and that is to send Momo on your way. Seeming to have guessed the doubts in Gue Momo's heart, Shin Miao said with a smile. Gue Momo's body trembled. She wanted to cry and scream, but she could not make any sound at all. She did not know when that infant in swaddling clothes had become a real young female, and no one had ever discovered the other side of this young female, and even she did not understand it. She wanted to resist fiercely and wanted to curse, but when she met that pair of beast-like eyes, she could not help but tremble. Chapter 111. My Shin family does not raise treacherous people. Even if Momo reaches the Yellow Springs Road and turns into a malicious spirit to seek revenge on me, I will not be afraid and perhaps fight with Momo again. Her words were colder than her smile. It is not that I have betrayed Momo, but Momo betrayed me. It is a pity for Momo's grandson and son. Second Shin has always been ruthless, and perhaps Momo will be reunited with them soon. No. Gue Momo's body trembled and her tears and snot had already flowed together as she cried pitifully, I beg you, save them. I have already said that a servant who betrays their master is not worthy of my concern. Shin Miao's words were cruel and cold. Watching from the sidelines is my greatest kindness. She slowly leaned forward as if she was whispering to Gue Momo when she was young and lightly said, because of the 10 over years of master and servant relationship, I came to see Gue Momo for the last time. Gue Momo, have a safe journey. A moving smile bloomed on her bright and clean little face. It was originally a cute and delicate little face, but it was so cruel that it made one's heart palpitate. Gue Momo still wanted to say something, but she saw Shin Miao standing up and putting on her cloak again. The corner of the cloak drew a pale white light in the darkness, as if the white paper money was fluttering on the coffin. That jade lantern was carried out of the room, and the moment the door was closed, everything fell back into darkness and despair flooded in from all directions. Outside, when Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang saw Shin Miao coming out, they then sighed in relief and supported Shin Miao to leave. After they left, a female figure appeared in the flowering shrubs and looked at Shin Miao's back view before looking at the tightly closed door of the woodshed, revealing a look of resentment. After a few rounds of autumn rain, the sky finally cleared up. Everything in the general residence seemed to have returned to its usual calmness, but the medicinal fragrance that came out from the eastern courtyard from time to time reminded the Shin residents of the turmoil that happened in the past few days. Shin Qing's consciousness seemed to be gradually recovering and at least was not as crazy as before when she saw people. It was just that Ren Wanyun was afraid that she would be stimulated again, so these days she had been locked up in Kai Yun Yuan and did not allow her to come out. She was even more afraid that Shin Qing would commit suicide, so she was always guarding her. As such, all the matters in the residence were handed over to Chen Roqiu to manage. Ren Wanyun rarely left the courtyard, and it gave Shin Miao a rare few days of peace. However, this did not mean that nothing had happened. A few days later, Gue Momo was finally executed by someone. He was charged with colluding with criminals and plotting to murder Shin Qing. Now in the Shin residence, there was no one who brought up Shin Qing's matter in front of Shin Miao. It was not because the matter had been settled, but because of Shin Miao's words in Rong Jing Tang that day. It made these people refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases, and did not dare to easily take action. He did not dare to touch Shin Miao, but he still dared to touch Gue Momo, the wet nurse by Shin Miao's side. According to the residence's laws, Gue Momo would be beaten to death with a rod. Generally speaking, servants who committed crimes would be executed. The bigger ones would be beaten to death with a rod, and the more ordinary ones would be downed with a bottle of medicine. In short, the slave contract was in the hands of the master, and no one cared whether he lived or died. But Gue Momo's death was really miserable, as her 4 limbs seemed to be broken by someone. There was not an inch of good bones in her entire body, and her 7 orifices were bleeding, looking extremely horrifying. Even the manservant who carried the corpse did not dare to look at the corpse's appearance, but Ren Wanyun still called Shin Miao to collect the corpse. Ren Wanyun's maid, Xiang Lan, came over and said, Furen said that even though Gue Momo committed a mistake and was executed, but she was after all 5th young lady's servant. So 5th young lady would still need to arrange for the matter of collecting the corpse, thus Gue Momo's corpse was placed in the western courtyard. 5th young lady, quickly go and take a look. Chapter 112. Most likely everyone wanted to see Shin Miao's panicked look. After all, the servants in the Shin residence knew that Gue Momo was Shin Miao's trusted aide. Now that she ended up with a tragic death, one feared that Shen Miao would be heartbroken. Most likely Ren Wanyan also thought so, thinking that Shen Miao would blame herself for Gui Momo's death. Who knew that on that day in front of everyone in the western courtyard, Shen Miao walked to Gui Momo's corpse and lifted the white cloth. Her expression did not change as she looked at the miserable corpse without even wrinkling her brows. Xiang Lan was surprised at Shen Miao's calmness but saw Shen Miao coldly scolding. Gui Momo was tyrannical in the western courtyard in the past, deceiving the superiors and the subordinates, a big servant bullying the master, arrogant and despotic. This kind of servant, even if she did not commit any mistakes, the western courtyard would not accept her. Today all of you will see clearly for me that in the future those who learn from Gui Momo's actions will all end up like this. Most of the western courtyard were planted by the second and third household spies, and in the past they saw Gui Momo dominating the place. Now that Gui Momo had died tragically and Shen Miao was actually so cold, fear involuntarily rose in their hearts. When Xiang Lan saw this scene, she knew that it was not good. She originally wanted to scare Shen Miao, but who knew that Shen Miao used Gui Momo's death to establish her prestige. She immediately returned to Kai Yunyuan to report the matter to Ren Wanyan. Bad. Fallen into a trap. When Ren Wanyan heard the matter, her hands loosened and the teacup fell onto the ground, breaking into pieces. Furin. Kai Ju was somewhat puzzled. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth. Gui Momo was originally a raft. One think that little slut had long wanted to get rid of Gui Momo but borrowed our hands. Now she even established her prestige in the western courtyard. Little slut, her calculations are really shrewd. Ren Wanyan was not stupid but on Shenqing's matter, as a mother, she inevitably lost her usual calmness. That night, the people who went to look for Gui Momo saw Shen Miao going to look for Gui Momo and heard some words. Gui Momo seemed to be loyal to Shen Miao. When they returned and told Ren Wanyan about it, Ren Wanyan was certain that Shenqing's accident was because Gui Momo and Shen Miao conspired to change the person. With such thoughts in his heart, the hatred toward Shen Miao and Gui Momo was like a torrential flood. Shen Miao temporarily could not be moved but Gui Momo, a servant, could be moved. Thus she used the cruelest method to torture Gui Momo to death. She originally thought that Shen Miao would definitely be sad when she saw Gui Momo die. But after hearing Xiang Lan's words, Ren Wanyan knew that she was being played by Shen Miao. Everything was set up by Shen Miao. Using a borrowed knife to kill, Shen Miao played it better than anyone else. Ren Wanyan's teeth itched with hatred. She had had a smooth sailing life in the inner residence for so many years, and all of Shen Gui's concubines were all subdued by her, but now they were repeatedly defeated in the hands of a silly little girl. Ren Wanyan's heart was filled with rage. Did you bring the letter for Prince Yu? Ren Wanyan asked. Yes, but madam, if master knew about it, he would definitely be angry. Kai Ju carefully replied. Now with Shenqing's matter, Shen Gui tried every possible way to hide it from Prince Yu for a while, hoping that Prince Yu would not discover it. But Ren Wanyan could not wait for Prince Yu to discover it immediately because with Prince Yu's temperament, if someone dared to play tricks under his eyelids, that person would definitely die a horrible death. Even if she quarreled with Shen Gui, she would take revenge for Shenqing. Since Shen Miao dared to threaten the entire Shen family, then did she dare to threaten Prince Yu? I want her to die without a burial ground. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth. Young lady is playing chess again. Bai Lu shook her head and was somewhat puzzled. What is the meaning of playing chess alone? Chapter 113. What else can one do other than play chess? Shuangjiang looked at the person at the table and said angrily, being grounded all day and not even able to leave the courtyard. If this goes on, one would not be able to do anything in the day. Shu Bai Lu said softly, do not say any more. Young lady is not happy being grounded, so do not mention it and make her angry. Shuangjiang mumbled, our young lady has a good temperament and would not get angry. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since one saw Shen Miao angry. Not to mention anger, there was no obvious emotion at all. Even though the previous Shen Miao was an idiot, her emotions were clear. If she was happy, she was happy, and if she was sad, she was sad. But now, the few personal maids could not understand her. If one said that one's growth was slow, then Shen Miao's change seemed to be completed overnight. No one knew how she changed from a simple and cowardly person to a plain and emotionless person. Bai Lu. Just as she was speaking, she heard Shen Miao calling her name, and Bai Lu quickly went forward to answer. Find a time to pawn the gold jewelry in the silver jewelry box in the cabinet, she said without turning her head back. Yes. Bai Lu quickly replied and was surprised, but young lady, yesterday one box of jewelry was pawned and this is the last box. No harm. Shen Miao put down the chess piece, after all there is no use for it. After pawning it, pass the banknotes to Jingzhe and call Gu Yuan. Bai Lu complied and went out, but there were some doubts in her heart. Shen Miao was anxious to pawn jewelry, but it seemed that she was anxious to use the money. One did not know what the money was used for. Kuai Huo Lu was the biggest restaurant in the Ding capital, and it was located in the heart of the bustling area. Opposite Kuai Huo Lu was a brothel. After the high officials and noble people had banquets at Kuai Huo Lu, most of them would go to the opposite brothel to seek pleasure. And the brothel was divided into a few grades. The more brilliant it was, the higher it was on the upper floors. The people at the top floor were those courtesans who only sold their skills but not their bodies. Below that were some famous young ladies, and the lowest were the 9th grade brothels. This kind of brothels did not have the qualifications to be called lu or courtyard, and could only be called ban or lower quarters. San Fu Ban was opposite Kuai Huo Lu and was the lowest grade brothel. Most of the people who came in and out were lowly laborers, and there were often people who threw sick and dying girls into the streets. The street beggars would carry these girls back, perhaps to vent their anger, or perhaps because their clothes could be sold for a copper coin. As compared to the exquisiteness of Kuai Huo Lu, the opposite San Fu Ban was simply hell on earth. At the window of Kuai Huo Lu, the young male's white sleeves were spotless as he frowned as he looked at the San Fu Ban opposite. He saw that someone had thrown the new maids in, and the maids were struggling and crying non-stop. Most likely it was some master who had sent the servants over. Some young maids were beautiful, and jealous matriarchs would sell them to San Fu Ban to prevent them from climbing onto the bed. How cruel! The white-robed young master shook his head. Although his tone was one of pity, he had no intention of going down to help. And the young gentleman opposite him was dressed in purple with a threatening noble air. He only poured the wine and lightly said, the person had already entered Prince Yu residence. It is still unknown whether one can find him or not. What if one cannot find him? The white-robed young master turned his head to look at him. Continue to search. The purple-clad youth's lips hooked up into a smile. That evil smile was exceptionally handsome, making the courtesan who was playing the instrument at the side absent-minded and played a wrong note. When the white-robed young master saw this, he smiled mischievously. Third Xia, your charm is getting bigger. Even beautiful women favor you. How do you want me to live? He made a long sigh. In fact, this white-robed young master was also very handsome, but compared to the purple-clad youth, he lacked that lazy noble air. That youth's expression was lazy, but his pair of eyes were very sharp, like the scorching sun in the sky, naturally dazzling and eye-catching. Standing beside him, the light was naturally covered up. Gao Yang, if you like, later I will bestow you a room. Xia Jingxing glanced at him. Never mind. The white-robed young master quickly waved his hands and smiled bitterly. Beauties can be seen from afar and not played with. I do not have that much energy. But you, he drank a mouthful of wine. It is the time when youths are unrestrained and unrestrained. How can one not have a female confidant by one's side? If you want to in Ming Qi, there will be a large group of people advancing wave after wave. Female confidant. Xia Jingxing smiled. How would one know that it is not a pink skeleton? Don't make it so scary. Gao Yang pointed to the brothel opposite. Look at how cute the young ladies upstairs are. What skeletons? Boring. Xia Jingxing followed his gaze and suddenly paused. His black eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Why is it him? Chapter 114. Many young ladies would be sent in to Sanfu Ban every day. Some of these young ladies were still very young and some were already old, but as long as they were sent in, it meant that there was no way out for the rest of their lives, and what awaited them was deep despair and a bleak ending. It was the same today. 2 lively little maids were thrown in, and among the group of haggard and withered females, they were like 2 tender spring onions, giving off a sense of being out of place. From what I see, there is no need to be fixed. The fierce-looking mother looked at the 2 of them critically, good-looking and tender skin. One just do not know how long they can last. Never mind, bring them into the tea room. The 2 little maids were already trembling in fear. These 2 were not others but Yen Mei and Shui Bai, who were ordered by Ren Wanyan to be sold to the 9th-ranked brothel. Yen Mei and Shui Bai had served Shenqing since young and were considered as the most reputable among the maids and had never suffered any hardships before. Now that they had seen the scene of purgatory on earth, they were so scared that their tears would not fall. And that mother's words had shattered their only hope. She said, "Watch them carefully and do not let them seek death." If they could not seek death, then they could only be like those lowly prostitutes and receive customers every day. Thinking of this, Yen Mei and Shui Bai could not help but feel that the world was spinning. Outside of Sanfu Ban, a young male was walking in at this moment. This male's appearance looked rather young and his bearing did not seem like a laborer. The young lady at the door said, "Did this young brother walk the wrong way? This is Sanfu Ban and above are the lofts and pavilions." The implication was that with this young man's identity, he would not come to this place even if he wanted to seek pleasure. This was a place where only the poorest people would come to. What is the meaning of those? The young man lowered his voice. "Do you have any new young ladies here?" The female at the door was surprised for a moment before understanding in her heart. Most likely this person had never come to such a lowly class before and wanted to find something fresh. This was nothing new. Wealthy families would always have a variety of ways to play, and to play in Sanfu Ban, the price was not expensive and anyone could afford to play. She smiled and said, "This little brother has come to the right place. Today, there are 2 new maidservants. They are the maidservants of an official who committed a mistake. They used to follow the young miss of an official's family. They are beautiful, but their price is slightly higher." "Show me," said the man. The woman leading the way brought the young man into the tea room. The reason why Sanfu Ban was the lowest brothel was not because it was a place where laborers came to, but because the young ladies here were very cheap. It only took the effort of a cup of tea. If the girl's culinary skills were better and her tone was gentler, being able to make the customer pay for another plate of pastries was also a skill. But generally speaking, the customers who came here would only order a pot of tea. Firstly, the ladies were not willing to spend the effort. No matter how much money they had, they would not be given a single cent. Secondly, most of the guests were stingy and were not willing to spend an extra copper coin. But today this young man had ordered a pot of tea and a plate of pastries. To Sanfu Ban, this was already considered as a very generous customer. The woman leading the way quickly called for the 2 young maids to be brought in. Yen Mei and Shui Bai were forced to change into thin muslin clothes and came to the tea room full of humiliation. In the autumn, both of them were shivering together. Their clothes could not block the cold and their hearts were very afraid. When the woman leading the way saw that the people were brought in, she said to the young man in a flattering manner, "Little brother, please slowly enjoy the tea. This servant will withdraw first." When she passed by Yen Mei and Shui Bai, she said in a threatening tone, "Serve this sir well." Chapter 115. After the female left, Yen Mei hesitated for a moment, and seeing that the young man did not move, she softly said, "This lord." When the words came out, she felt deeply humiliated. In the past, when they were in the Shen residence, they were the personal maids of the second household's young lady. Not to mention Kai Yun Yuan, even in the entire Shen residence, the maids would be respectful to both of them. But now they had to be ridden by thousands of people and even be humiliated by a strange male. And all of this was given by Ren Wanyun. It was Ren Wanyun who threw them to this lowly brothel. More than 10 years of master and servant relationship was wiped out in a day, and they were worse than enemies. Do you want to leave this place? That young man suddenly asked. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were surprised for a moment before recovering to their senses. Shui Bai still had some doubts, but Yan Mei excitedly knelt down and said, "If this lord can bring us out, this servant is willing to serve this lord for all eternity and repay this lord." For Yan Mei, staying here was worse than death, and it would be better to follow a man. At least it would be better to live in this miserable life where one would never be able to get out. Shui Bai was reminded by Yan Mei's words and also knelt down, begging this lord to save this servant's life. This lord will order these servants to do anything. When the young man heard this, he almost choked on the tea in his mouth and turned his head away uncomfortably. This person was not someone else but the outer courtyard guard of the Shen residence, Mo Qing. Today he came to Sanfu Ban under Shen Miao's orders. Even though he did not understand how an unmarried young female like Shen Miao would have such understanding of the brothels in the capital, but today he still had an important matter, and even though it was somewhat awkward, he still did as she said. "I can buy your slave contracts and you do not need to follow me and be free," he said. When Yan Mei and Shui Bai heard it, they stared at Mo Qing in disbelief. They did not understand how there would be such a person, as the males that came here were naturally looking for pleasure. The young man in front of them did not look like he was a coolie. Yan Mei was naturally more alert as she asked, "What does this lord want these two servants to do?" "Simple." Mo Qing said, "One heard that both of you were the personal maids of the young lady of the general residence's second household. How did you end up in such a situation?" Shui Bai bit her lips and said hatefully, "Because we committed a mistake and were expelled from the Shen residence. But the two of us did not commit any mistake and are only slaves and maids. Whatever master says, we will do." Up until now, Shui Bai had not revealed the key to the matter. It could be assumed that she still had some affection for the second branch. Mo Qing said, "Then you all are hateful?" The two of them were silent. Hate? Naturally, he hated them. It would have been fine if he had given them a cup of poisoned wine to end everything. However, he had to use such a method to make them live a life worse than death, existing in this world like a walking corpse. But what did they do wrong? No one knew what had happened that night. Shen Qing's inexplicable disappearance was the fault of these servants. Although he was heartbroken that something had happened to his young mistress, only a saint would be able to push all the blame onto the two of them. Thinking about it, you also hate. Yan Mei, I heard that you have a younger sister who is a second-rank maid in the Shen family's second household's courtyard. Shui Bai, you have a lot of face in the Shen residence and there are many sisters around. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were startled in their hearts. This person had actually told them everything about their origins. Yes, when Yan Mei and Shui Bai were bought into the Shen residence, they initially said that they were orphans, but that was deliberately concealed in order to select them. Yan Mei's biological younger sister was a second-rank maid in Ren Wanyun's courtyard. Because Shui Bai had a lively temperament, there were many good sisters in Kai Yun Yuan. There is no free trade in this world. I will bring you all away and you all think of a way to tell me about the second household of the Shen residence. Chapter 116. The two of them immediately raised their heads. Yan Mei cried out involuntarily, "You want to deal with Madam?" This person had already investigated the two of them thoroughly. However, what he wanted was information about the second branch. In other words, he wanted to plant a spy in the second branch. It was naturally impossible for Yan Mei and Shui Bai to return to the second household, but their sisters were still in Kai Yun Yuan in the Shen residence, so it was naturally possible to pass some news in private. "What do you want?" Shui Bai asked. "What does this have to do with you?" Mo Qing said, "Second Furin of the Shen family sold you to a 9th-rank brothel and want you. Living a life worse than death, it's not too much to treat your enemies. Could it be that you still care about the relationship between master and servant? If you don't look out for yourself, heaven and earth will destroy you." It's fine if you want to be loyal servants. I don't have much time to talk nonsense with you. If this deal doesn't work out, then forget it. He stood up and made to leave. Sir, please wait. Yan Mei suddenly interjected, this servant is willing to make this deal with Lord. As long as Lord can bring us out of here, this servant is willing to do anything. Yan Mei. Shui Bai was still in a dilemma. Shui Bai, think about how you treat Madam, and how Madam treats you. This man is right. Every man for himself. Are you going to stay here for the rest of your life? Just like those women outside who still have to receive customers even when they're sick. Yan Mei spoke quickly and anxiously, seemingly with a trace of ruthlessness. Thinking of those sickly women outside, Shui Bai couldn't help but shiver and quickly said, this servant is also willing to follow this lord. Then this transaction is considered to be completed. Mo Qing smiled in satisfaction, but his heart was somewhat surprised as the situation was not different from what Shen Miao had expected. Before leaving, Shen Miao said that the second household's Ren Wanyun was powerful and her methods were brilliant. She was good at winning over people's hearts, and the servants in Kaiyun Yuan were all very loyal. Even if they were thrown into such a place, it would be difficult for Yan Mei and Shui Bai to immediately surrender. But there was no need to worry too much. They only needed to use the tragic state of the Sanfu Ban females to remind them that these two maids already had some complaints about Ren Wanyun's way of doing things, and adding on their own fear of this place, they would still agree to Mo Qing's conditions. When can we leave this place? Yan Mei asked anxiously. Today is fine. I will arrange for you to meet with your sisters. You need them to inform me of the news of the second branch the next day. Don't try to play any tricks. Even if you try to tell the second branch about this, they won't believe you. Mo Qing even threatened at the end, since I can let you come out from this place, naturally I can also let you return to this place and no one can save you. Yan Mei and Shui Bai could see the murderous intent in Mo Qing's eyes, and their hearts could not help but waver. Finally the last bit of luck was gone. All of them knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Mo Qing. This servant does not dare and will do as you say. Mo Qing put down the teapot and walked out of the tea room by himself. When the mama outside saw him coming out so quickly, she thought that Yan Mei and Shui Bai did not serve well and quickly said, this little older brother must be feeling unhappy. Those two little hussies are new today and do not know the rules. It would be fine after a few days of training. If you like, we have other girls here. No need. Mo Qing said, just the two of them. I will buy them. The mama was surprised for a moment. The young ladies of Sanfu Ban had never been bought by anyone before. This was against the rules, as most of them were criminals, and the purpose of sending them here was to torture the other party. She said with difficulty, this little older brother, according to the rules here, the young ladies will not sell themselves. 100 liang. Mo Qing took out a banknote from his sleeves and waved it in front of the mama, two girls. Chapter 117. The mother's eyes lit up and suddenly snatched the banknotes from Mo Qing's hands. Fearing that he would regret, she smiled like a blossoming flower, since little older brother likes it, it is the fortune of these two girls. This servant will go and bring their slave contracts over. But little older brother must remember not to let others recognize these two girls, otherwise if Sanfu Ban would be in trouble, little older brother would also invite trouble. 100 taels of silver. Even in those better brothels, the young ladies who were sought after would not be able to sell for such a price. Even if Yan Mei and Shui Bai did not eat or drink until they died of old age, one feared that they would not be able to earn back even half of the money. The mothers here were all doing business, so how could there be a reason to not want the money? But she was also worried that if it was known by others, especially the master who sold the two girls, she would be in trouble. Now she could only pretend that the two girls were dead. When the mother happily went to bring Yan Mei and Shui Bai out, Mo Qing was somewhat regretful. 100 taels of silver was not a small sum of money, and it was exchanged from Jingzhe pawning an entire box of jewelry from Shen Miao. Now it was to redeem the two maids, and it was just to plant an informant. Shen Miao's style was a little too big. Mo Qing thought about it but gently shook his head as his heart did not dare to agree. At the opposite Kuai Hualu, the black-clad person appeared in front of the window and said, "Master, it has been investigated clearly. That person is an outer courtyard guard of the Shen residence, and the two girls that were bought were once the personal maids of the daughter of the Shen residence's second household. It seems that someone wanted to plant an informant in the second household and the person behind it is unknown." To be able to clearly hear the conversation between Mo Qing, Yan Mei and Shui Bai, it was obvious that this person's skills were extremely high, else even Mo Qing would not be aware that he was being eavesdropped. Gao Yang narrowed his eyes. It seems that the Shen residence is not too peaceful. The person behind it did not even let off the maids. TSK, it is too pervasive. Master, do you want to investigate that person? The black-clad person asked the purple-clad youth. No need. I know who he is. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. You know? Gao Yang looked at him. Who is he? Who was he? Xie Jingxing smiled and his eyes were somewhat deep. Shen Miao found a highly skilled guard. Even though it could not be compared to his subordinates, it was enough to deal with those people in the Shen residence. As for now, he did not even let off the little lass from San Fu Ban. It seemed that he intended to make a move. However, none of this had anything to do with him. Shan Lang. Xie Jingxing said, "Send a message to Yu Shu to quickly return to the capital." You? Gao Yang's expression turned solemn. It's not that they didn't find anything. Why did you call them back? He who strikes first has the advantage, the young man said calmly. As time passed, the general's mansion seemed to have regained its former tranquility. Shen Miao had been grounded for a long time and these days she did not go to Guangwentang. Guyu and Jingzhe were afraid that she would fall behind in her studies but she did not care about it. What was the use of learning those useless poems in Guangwentang? It would be better to stay in the residence and cause less trouble. If there was anything worth being happy about, it would be that Yan Mei and Shui Bai that Mo Qing had bribed finally met with their sisters. Shui Bai was still alright but Yan Mei's younger sister, Chun Tao, had always wanted to take revenge for her elder sister ever since she knew that Yan Mei was sold to a brothel. Unfortunately her status was low and she had the heart but not the strength. Now that she had met with Yan Mei and knew that her elder sister was fine, she promised Mo Qing without a second word that she would pass the message for Mo Qing. Coincidentally, after Yan Mei and Shui Bai left, the two personal maids by Shen Qing's side were empty. Ren Wanyun saw that Chun Tao was clever in doing things, so she gave Chun Tao to Shen Qing to be her personal maid. This way, it would be easier to grasp the movements of the second household. Chapter 118. Now that Shen Qing's body was getting better, it was just that her temperament had not completely recovered. Even though it was much better than before, she would occasionally be absent-minded and would tremble in fear when certain words were mentioned. Most likely she still needed to recuperate her body. This day, Ren Wanyun threw a tantrum in the room and the floor was filled with broken teacups. Now Ren Wanyun's temper was getting worse. In the past, because everything went smoothly, there would be times when she was unhappy but now she would punish people every 3 to 5 days. Kai Yun Yuan was gloomy the entire day. That heartless person. Ren Wanyun said angrily, only know how to run to the vixen's courtyard. Qing became like this and only came to visit a few times. So heartless. She was scolding Shen Gui and the servants in the room did not dare to breathe loudly. Ren Wanyun was angry at Shen Gui but it was not so. It was the letter that she wrote to Prince Yu, indicating that Shen Miao and Shen Qing had exchanged identities that night and was stopped by Shen Gui. Moreover, one did not know what method Shen Gui used that Prince Yu did not seem to know about the matter until now. She originally wanted to use Prince Yu to punish Shen Miao but it was spoiled by Shen Gui. Ren Wanyun was not reconciled and could only vent all her anger on Shen Miao. Just as she was thinking, she heard a cry of alarm coming from the inner room. Ren Wanyun's expression changed and quickly went in to take a look. She saw Chun Tao holding a small bowl of porridge to feed Shinqing, but she did not know how the porridge was spilled and Shinqing was half lying on her stomach vomiting. What happened? Ren Wanyan snapped and glared at Chun Tao. Let you take care of young lady and you are so lazy. This servant deserves to die. Chun Tao quickly knelt down and said, it is just that young lady these few days often vomited and just now when she was eating the porridge, she vomited again. This servant will be bold to say that Furen should not call a physician for young lady. Could it be that she ate something bad? These days, the physician that took care of Shinqing did not come often. Because Shinqing's external injuries were almost healed and she needed to recuperate, Ren Wanyan accompanied her all day long, allowing Shinqing to gradually regain some consciousness. Now hearing Chun Tao say that, her heart was anxious. Just as she was about to call Kai Ju to bring an invitation to invite a physician over, she was suddenly surprised as if she realized something. Looking at Chun Tao, she slowly asked, you said that Qing often vomited these few days? Yes, Chun Tao was a bit confused, but the food is all specially prepared from the kitchen. Sometimes, Miss feels dizzy. Ren Wanyan clutched her chest and a wave of shock rose in her heart. Chun Tao was still young and did not know about this matter, but she was someone who had experienced it. Looking at Shinqing's appearance, could it be that she was pregnant? Her vision turned black and she almost fainted. Xiang Lan who was beside her quickly supported her, Madam. Take my invitation and invite physician Chen over. Ren Wanyan paused for a moment before she patted her chest and said while looking at Shinqing with a horrified gaze. At the side, Chun Tao lowered her head, but no one could see the smile in her eyes. As Shinqing's personal maid, it was naturally not the first time she had discovered that Shinqing was suffering from nausea. Most likely it had been some time, but the first person she told was not Ren Wanyan, but Emo Qing who passed the news to her. Emo Qing also told her that if Ren Wanyan did not discover it, then temporarily hide the matter and talk about it after a period of time. It was also that Chun Tao's luck was not bad. After such a long time, Ren Wanyan did not discover any problems with Shinqing. Until today. Physician Chen, who was outside, quickly rushed over under Xiang Lan's urging. Previously Shinqing's external injuries were also treated by him. This was the physician that Ren Wanyan's maiden family gave to Ren Wanyan when she married. Sometimes when Ren Wanyan wanted to deal with any concubines or do some inconvenient things, Physician Chen would help. Physician Chen was Ren Wanyan's confidant, so naturally there was no need to avoid anything. Chapter 119. Ren Wanyan anxiously looked at Dr. Chen as he took Shinqing's pulse. Shinqing was still somewhat afraid and shrunk into Ren Wanyan's embrace. Dr. Chen put down his hand and Shinqing was somewhat dignified. He looked at Shinqing before shaking his head at Ren Wanyan. All of you, leave. Ren Wanyan said to the servants in the room. Xiang Lan, Kai Ju and Chun Tao hurriedly retreated. After the servants left, Physician Chen then sighed and said to Ren Wanyan, eldest young lady's pulse is as smooth as beads, it is a joyous pulse. Even though she had already guessed it, Ren Wanyan still felt dizzy when she heard the doctor say it. She looked at Physician Chen and her voice unconsciously trembled, but she still said firmly, Physician is able to let Qinger abort this child. Qinger is still young, she cannot be discovered by others. If it was only her body that was tainted, as long as she hid it well, she might have a way out in the future. But if she had a child, she would be considered an adulterous child, and the child in Shinqing's belly would be drowned. Eldest Mrs. body is delicate and she is still young. Dr. Chen said, if the fetus is miscarried, I'm afraid it will hurt the foundation of her body. If she is not careful, I'm afraid it will be difficult for her to have another child in the future. One blow after another landed on Ren Wanyan's head. If Shinqing lost the ability to be a child's mother, even if she were to find another family in the future, Ren Wanyan knew better than anyone else what kind of ending a woman who could not bear children would end up with. A woman without a child in the inner courtyard was like a soldier without a weapon on the battlefield. In the end, she would suffer a crushing defeat. Moreover, eldest Miss has not fully recovered. If she aborts the fetus, it will be very dangerous, Dr. Chen said. No, you can't lose it. Ren Wanyun was dumbstruck like a wooden chicken, and after a moment, she looked at Shen Qing, who was in her embrace, and could not help but feel sorrowful, my Qing with a bitter fate. If the child was miscarried, it might cause Shen Qing to lose her life. Even if she managed to keep her life, she might not be able to give birth to another child in the future. No matter what, I can't abort the fetus. But if I don't abort the fetus, then, what will happen to Shen Qing in the future? There seemed to be no way out no matter what. Ren Wanyun's heart was only filled with deep despair. Outside the door, Chun Tao looked inside and said softly, Sister Xiang Lan, eldest miss. Is eldest miss, Shuf, Xiang Lan warned, speak less, if Furen knows about it, you will not have a good time. Kai Ju said worriedly, what should we do now? She and Xiang Lan had naturally guessed what was going on. If Shen Qing was pregnant, what would Kai Yin Yuan do in the future? He would probably have to consider every step carefully. Chun Tao curled her lips, but her eyes flashed with pride. Physician Chen came out from Kai Yin Yuan and left the Shen residence before returning to his own residence in the northern part of the city. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw his wife and child running out. He couldn't help but wipe his sweat. Today, before he went out to see the patient, he received a letter from an unknown person, telling him that when he was going to treat Shen Qing, he must say that Shen Qing could not abort the fetus and think of a way to let Ren Wanyun protect the fetus, otherwise he would kill his entire family. That letter also included his wife's hairpin. Physician Chen was afraid in his heart, and when he was treating Shen Qing, he could only do as that person said. He was originally Ren Wanyun's maiden family who spent a lot of money to help Ren Wanyun, but now he had betrayed his mistress, thus his heart was naturally shocked and afraid, and secretly thought about leaving the capital. Even so, Physician Chen's heart still had some doubts. According to what Ren Wanyun said, even Ren Wanyun herself only found out that Shen Qing had morning sickness today. How did the person who threatened him know about this matter? In the western courtyard, Guyu walked in and whispered a few words to Shen Miao, who was playing chess in front of the table. After a moment, Shen Miao then smiled, well done. Have you sent the money to Physician Chen? Mo Qing had already sent it over. Guyu said, why did young lady give him such a generous amount of money? Since he had already threatened with his life, there is no need for money. That is not the same. Shen Miao put down the chess piece in her hands and smiled gently, people will change. Physician Chen would sooner or later escape the capital with his entire family, and it would be difficult to handle in the future. But if one were to give a large sum of money, what do you think he will do? This servant does not know. Guyu shook her head. He would think that since he had already betrayed, he might as well betray to the end and take more money to be worthy of his betraying mistress. He would continue until his mistress found out that he had been betrayed and maintain the entire lie to not be exposed. Guyu was slightly surprised for a moment and could not say what kind of feeling she had in her heart. Since when did her own young lady know what a capable person was thinking in their heart? But Guyu said in puzzlement, what is the purpose of maintaining this lie? For what? Shen Miao smiled, let Mo Qing speak to Chun Tao and let her help eldest sister to take care of the fetus. The better the pregnancy, naturally it would be the most beneficial for us. Chapter 120. The days were getting colder and colder. Late autumn had passed, and in the blink of an eye, it was winter. This year's general residence was exceptionally bleak. Shen Miao was grounded in the Shen residence and Shen Qing was bedridden. Every day only Shen Yu went up and down Guang Wen Tang, and even at the mid-autumn banquet, only Chen Ro Qiu brought Shen Yu along. Naturally it was Shen Yu who was in the limelight, but these matters had nothing to do with Shen Miao. However, as time went on, Shen Qing's matter couldn't be delayed any longer. Ren Wanyun asked Physician Chen to prescribe some pills to alleviate Shen Qing's morning sickness. Others would not be able to see any problems, but if it continued, the paper would not be able to wrap the fire. This cannot go on. Ren Wanyun frowned as she pressed her forehead, one must think of a way to let Qing'er go out to avoid it. Moreover, he would bring Shenqing back after she gave birth to the child. In order to avoid other people's eyes and ears, he would say that Shenqing was suffering from a malignant disease. Perhaps the world would be at peace once the storm had passed. But with your current body, if you give it away, you will inevitably suffer. Xiang Lan was a little worried. Moreover, this trip will definitely take some time. Young lady's youth will also be delayed. Ren Wanyan's brows frowned. It was correct that Shenqing's nominal age was 16 and after one more year, she would be 17. In this Ding capital, it was just right for females to marry at 16 or 17 years of age, but Shenqing was an official's daughter and naturally the in-laws that she would choose would be of high status. If he waited another year, he was afraid that all the good noble children would have already been picked by others. Yuan'er can only rush back at the end of the year, but Qing'er's body cannot be delayed. A trace of hostility flashed across Ren Wanyan's brows. Furen, Kaiju, who had not spoken all along, spoke. Nubi heard that the assistant minister of the secretariat Wei family Furen had recently discussed with third Furen, and seemed to want to come to our residence to propose for the Wei family D eldest son, and to ask for fifth young lady. Shen Miao. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth. She is really lucky. The assistant minister of the secretariat was a rank 4 official. For a rank 1 military general like Shen Xian, coming to propose was overestimating himself. But the eldest D son of the Wei family, Wei Qian, was a youth with superior talent and looks. To marry an idiot female in the Ding capital, at least in terms of talent, he was definitely worthy of Shen Miao. Moreover, Wei Qian had already entered officialdom at such a young age, and one feared that in the future he would be successful in his youth, thus it was Shen Miao's great luck to come to propose. Heard that it is the Wei family that has the intention to climb up to the residence. Kaiju said, so they reluctantly used their son to exchange for a chance to be on good terms with the Shen residents. The meaning in Kaiju's words was that Shen Miao was a very despicable person and was not worthy of that young Master Wei. She was lucky. Ren Wanyan's expression was somewhat sinister. For so many years, even though Shen Xian's official prestige was great, there was almost no one who came to the Shen residence to propose marriage for Shen Miao. It was not because of anything else but because Shen Miao was too weak and stupid. With Shen Xian's official rank, the husband that Shen Miao was looking for would definitely be from a noble family, but among the noble families, they were unable to accept such a matriarch who was almost the laughingstock of Ming Qi. So even with Shen Xian's official rank, no one was interested in Shen Miao. Now that the Wei family suddenly came to propose marriage, even though Kaiju said that she wanted to climb up, but upon careful thinking, most likely it was because of Shen Miao's performance at the academy examinations that made everyone feel refreshed and the original stupid look had changed, thus the Wei family could not help but take action. Even if it was in the past, Ren Wanyan would not tolerate such a good marriage to land on Shen Miao. Moreover, now that Shenqing was like this, she could not see Shen Miao, the initiator of all this, living well. Furen need not worry. Xiang Lan said, old Furen will definitely not agree to this marriage. Chapter 121. In the general residence, old Shen Furen bore the brunt of the hatred towards the first household. Unable to deal with Shen Xian, old Shen Furen was able to secretly grasp Shen Miao's marriage in the palm of her hands. In the past, with Ren Wanyan's help, Shen Miao's name as an idiot was spread all over Ming Qi. But now that Shen Miao had gotten rid of the stupid title, with old Shen Furen scheming, she would definitely think of ways to dispel their thoughts. With such a cheap life, how could she enjoy such luck? One fear that before she could marry over, she would die in the room. Ren Wanyan's words were also vicious. She looked at the tightly shut door of the inner room and saw that Shenqing rested in the room every day, unwilling to see anyone. A trace of resentment and indignation flashed past her heart, but Master actually wishes to marry Qing'er to that kind of person. Shen Gui did not know that Shenqing was pregnant and Ren Wanyan did not intend to tell him. Shen Gui was such a cold-hearted person. Now that Shenqing had only lost her chastity, he could still tolerate it. However, if he knew that Shenqing was pregnant, he would definitely disregard Shenqing's body and forcefully abort the child. But even so, Shingue was afraid that the matter would be exposed and actually urged Ren Wanyun to find a marriage for Shinqing. As long as Shinqing was married off early, it would be good if the other party was from a noble family. Thus, after picking and choosing, he finally picked the youngest son of the Imperial Academy supervisor, Huang Dexing. Speaking of which, the Huang family's status was actually a level higher than the Wei family's. Naturally, they also had countless glory and splendor. However, compared to the Wei family, the Huang family's master and madam were not easy to deal with. Moreover, Huang Dexing was a homosexual who liked men. Because of this, the Huang family didn't care much about picking a wife. As long as the wife was gentle and could turn a blind eye to Huang Dexing's debauchery, they didn't care about anything else. Shingue thought that since Shinqing's body had already been tainted, it would be better for her to marry into the Huang family. Since Huang Dexing had no interest in women and would not touch Shinqing, naturally this secret would not be discovered by others. Shinqing only wanted to sit on the empty title of the daughter-in-law of the Huang family and enjoy glory, splendor, wealth and rank. On the other hand, he could also use his relationship with the Huang family to further his career. Shingue naturally had a good idea, but Ren Wanyun did not agree. Even if Shinqing's body was tainted, in Ren Wanyun's heart, she must find another good marriage for Shinqing. Marrying Huang Dexing was equivalent to being a widow for the rest of her life. She would definitely not exchange her daughter for this marriage. Because of this matter, Shingue and Ren Wanyun had been arguing for a long time, and the already cold relationship between the husband and wife became even worse. Shingue almost did not come to Kai Yin Yuan and would rest in the concubine's room every day. It would be good if fifth young lady and eldest young lady married someone else. Kai Ju said indignantly. When Ren Wanyun heard that, her brows jumped and she suddenly looked at Kai Ju. What did you say? Kai Ju jumped in fright and stammered, this servant said if fifth young lady and second young lady marry another person, it would be good. You're right. Ren Wanyun stood up all of a sudden and there was a look of ecstasy on her face. She said, correct, as long as Qing'er and that little slut's marriage is changed. She muttered, it should be my Qing'er. This time, let that little slut suffer the consequences of her own actions. As she spoke, she suddenly thought of something, bring my cloak over and go to Rongjing Tang. Why is Furen going to Rongjing Tang? Kai Ju and Xiang Lan were somewhat confused by Ren Wanyun's sudden action. But they saw Ren Wanyun smiling sinisterly. Naturally it is for old Furen to leave behind that good marriage with the Wei family. In the winter, the sunlight shone on the flowers and plants on the windowsill and it seemed to reflect a layer of pale green. However, that sunlight was very thin, as if one was not careful, it would be broken. Shen Miao was wearing an embroidered double butterfly skirt and a narrow purple and lotus green embroidered robe. The deep purple made her fair skin look almost transparent and her brows seemed to be drawn with ink. Even if she stood in front of the window without moving, there was a faint air of nobility lingering around her. Chapter 122. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang were somewhat dazed as they looked at her. Even for them who had been serving Shen Miao since young and had seen Shen Miao's face for so many years, they did not know why, but every time they see Shen Miao, they would have a feeling of not recognizing her. That kind of faint elegance appeared on this originally childish young female, thus the lovable became dignified and the immature became austere. Young lady seems to like to wear lotus green clothes. Bai Lu said, even though it looks good to wear, but at this age, do not young ladies like pink or blue bright colors? Lotus green color was dignified, but for the young ladies in the boudoir, other than the princesses and Junju in the palace, they would rarely wear this color. Firstly, it was easy to look old, and secondly, it was difficult to suppress this color, and if one was not careful, one would look like a child who secretly wore an adult's clothes. But Shen Miao obviously had a tender little face, but this set of clothes had the bearing of an imperial concubine in the palace. The maids were puzzled. Even though Bai Lu and Shuangjiang lowered their voices, it was still heard by Shen Miao. She smiled gently. Why did she like to wear lotus green? Most likely it was because this color could constantly remind her to be calm, deep and never be soft-hearted. In her previous life in the palace, she would wear the Empress's court dress every day, and the golden color was able to deter those imperial concubines who had ulterior motives. Putting on the airs of an empress, it made others fear to shoot at the rat for fear of breaking the vases, but that color was actually not suitable for her. She married Fu Xiu-yi at a young age and experienced many things that others at her age could not experience. It was because of this that her naive and almost stupid temperament was finally honed into a pool of stagnant water. Afterwards she fought for favor with Mei Furin in the inner palace, and in order to protect Fu Sheng and Wan Yu, she wanted to keep that bright yellow Empress's court dress, but at the end nothing was left. Evil purple to seize the vermilion meant to rebel against one's superiors and to usurp the throne. To always wear purple meant that there would be a day when she would snatch the power that the imperial family of Ming Qi yearned for and step on those bandits and robbers. But Shen Miao suddenly thought of another handsome youth who was always dressed in purple. Evil purple to seize the vermilion. One did not know if that mysterious eldest son of the Xie family also had the intention to usurp the throne. Miss, bad news. Just as she was muttering to herself, Jing Zhe hurriedly ran back from outside and said, "Young lady, Mo Qing had obtained news from Chun Tao that the Assistant Minister of the Legislative Affairs, the Wei family, came to propose marriage, and old Shen Furin had accepted the Wei family's Geng invitation." Shuang Jiang frowned and asked, "To be in such a hurry, who is the Wei family proposing marriage?" It's a girl." Jing Zhe stomped her feet anxiously. That Wei family's situation is still unclear. How could old Furin not ask young lady's opinion before accepting the Geng invitation? Master and Madam don't even know. This is clearly a forced purchase. Jing Zhe had always looked down on old Shen Furin and naturally knew that old Shen Furin's actions would not let Shen Miao have a good time. If that Wei family was really a good family, how would old Shen Furin let Shen Miao off so easily? "Miss, what should we do?" "This time, we must quickly write a letter to Master." Bai Lu also revealed an anxious expression. The maids in the room were all extremely busy, but Shen Miao remained silent. After a moment, she laughed softly under the surprised gaze of the maids and said, "This is really strange. Even though the Assistant Minister of the Legislative Affairs is a fourth-rank official, but the Wei family's family is rich. As for the Wei family's son, Wei Qian, he is also a talented person. For such a good thing to land on my head, it makes me feel flattered." Chapter 123. Young lady. Bai Lu was startled. Young lady said that the Wei family is not bad? Not only not bad. Shen Miao said lightly, one fear that when father returns and knows of this marriage, there would be no reason to reject. Wei Qian to an official's young lady is indeed worthy to entrust a lifetime to. How did young lady know? Jing Zhe was puzzled. Shen Miao was in the residence all day, and even if she was outside, she would be in Guangwentang. As for the family circumstances of a certain official's family or the temperament of the son, there was no reason to know. But to say it like this, it seemed to be very familiar, which made Jing Zhe scratching her head. To Shen Miao, who was in the boudoir, she naturally did not know which young master was a good match. But as Empress Shen, she knew clearly which official's son was talented and virtuous. Wei Qian was indeed a good talent, and his temperament was considered proper. Thus when the Wei family came to propose marriage, Shen Miao would not believe that old Shen Furin would agree to this marriage. Just at this moment, one saw Guyu jogging in from outside with a bewildered expression. Young lady Xier of Rongjing Tang came to pass old Furin's words, asking you to quickly make a trip to Rongjing Tang. The action is really fast." Shen Miao's eyes congealed and she smiled. "Then let us go take a look." In Rongjing Tang. Shen Yuanbo snuggled up to old Shen Furin's side. These days Ren Wanyun was busy taking care of Shen Qing and simply left Shen Yuanbo at Rongjing Tang. Old Shen Furin doted on this grandson and naturally treasured him a lot. She even treated Ren Wanyun in a much more amiable manner. Chen Rouqiu and Shen Yu were not around. Ever since Ren Wanyun took care of Shen Qing in the residence, Chen Rouqiu temporarily took over as the head of the household. Naturally, the task of representing the Shen family to socialize with the various Furins fell onto her. Chen Roqiu naturally would not let go of such a good opportunity and would bring Shen Yu out to socialize daily. She also wanted to let Shen Yu show her face in front of the various noble Furins so that in the future, Shen Yu's marriage would be more advantageous. Ren Wanyun stood at the lower side of the hall and her eyes were deep, not knowing what she was thinking. Shen Miao was brought to Rongjing Tang by old Shen Furin's maid, Shi'er, and greeted old Shen Furin. These days, she was grounded and had to copy Buddhist scriptures in the Shen family's ancestral hall and kneel before the memorial tablet. Most likely old Shen Furin did not like her and did not let her come over to pay her respects. Seeing old Shen Furin again was before she was grounded. Fifth girl, recently copying scriptures in the ancestral hall, is your heart at peace? Old Shen Furin asked. Upon hearing this old woman's genteel speech, Shen Miao almost laughed in her heart. If one were to say that the elders in the Shen residence were disrespectful, then old Shen Furin would bear the brunt of it, but at this time she would still say such restless words. She smiled gently, as Zuzu wish. That is good. Old Shen Furin pretentiously coughed lightly and Fuer quickly handed over the hot tea. She lifted the teacup cover and took a sip before looking at Shen Miao. Even though the matter in the past was not your fault, it was because of you. Moreover, your temperament is too stubborn, so I punished you to copy scriptures. Do you blame me in your heart? Shen Miao wouldn't dare. I know you're a sensible person. Old Shen Furin looked at her with satisfaction. You are so sensible and also my Shen family's young lady, so naturally I will dote on you. Seeing that you have reached the age of marriage, today the assistant minister of the Legislative Bureau, the Wei family, came over to propose marriage for the D son of the Wei family, and the one they seek is you. Do you think that it is not bad? If it was not that it was not the right time, Shen Miao would have laughed out loud. For a person like old Shen Furin, most likely her lifetime of experience would be in that brothel. How would there be an elder in a family who would ask their granddaughter, do you think that it is not bad? One did not know what old Shen Furin was thinking. Chapter 124. Parents' Orders and Matchmakers' Words. Shen Miao smiled. Naturally father and mother will worry about this granddaughter's marriage. You, this girl. Old Shen Furin saw that she had bumped into a soft rebuff and almost flew into a rage. When she heard Ren Wanyun's soft cough at the side to remind her, she slowly changed into a calm expression and said, You, this girl is really too capricious. Originally you adore. Then forget it. Now seeing that you seem to have sobered up a lot these days, it seems that you know the propriety. This assistant minister of the Legislative Bureau's family is considered to be well matched with us. That young master of the Wei family, Wei Qian, is also a dignified person and is an outstanding talent in both literature and martial arts. Even if your father was here, he would not say anything bad about this marriage. You have been brought up to this age and this is the first time such a family came to propose marriage. If one do not grasp the opportunity well, that young master of the Wei family will turn around and become someone else's husband. Even though old Shen Furin was not good as an elder, her matchmaking skills were not bad. Most likely it was because she was a songstress and knew that young females love to be charming, thus she only said that Wei Qian was a good person in everyone's heart. Even though Shen Miao knew that old Shen Furin did not lie and that Wei Qian was indeed a good person. Even so, Shen Miao was still unmoved and said lightly, Young Master Wei is indeed not bad, but it is not what I wish for. Grandmother, better forget it. My marriage will naturally be decided by my father and mother. You! After being contradicted time and time again, old Shen Furin did not have any patience and finally said angrily, Are you complaining that this grandmother is interfering in your marriage and extending my hand too far? This granddaughter did not say so. The implied meaning was that this was what you said yourself. Old Shen Furin was so angry that she was about to go crazy. Now the unruly Shen Miao was covered with thorns all over her body and could not move at all, making one's heart ache from suffocating. Old Shen Furin hated the first household but was also afraid of Shen Xian. Thus for so many years, even though her heart was angry, she could only hold it in and not get close to Shen Miao and put on a serious but fair grandmother act. She could not hit Shen Miao as this would be discovered by Shen Xian and at most he would reprimand her, Thus she had been watching coldly as Ren Wanyun and Chen Roqiu raised Shen Miao to become a cripple. Even though it was said that one would die from flattery, but it was rarely discovered by others. In the end, no one knew what happened, but one day, Shen Miao, who had been raised to a cripple, suddenly became quick-witted. Not only was she quick-witted, her temperament also became impervious to everything. She said angrily, "Do you still have any respect for your superiors?" Shen Miao felt bored. With old Shen Furen's patience and determination, if she was thrown into the inner palace, she would not be able to survive for more than 2 days. She had seen too many powerful females in her past life, and old Shen Furen was such a short-sighted and did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. She really did not want to put her in her eyes. "I ask you again," old Shen Furen still remembered the purpose of today and looked at Shen Miao as she asked, "What is your intention in this marriage?" "I do not agree." Shen Miao answered. "Good, good, good." After saying "good" 3 times in a row, Fu and Sheer quickly went forward to caress old Shen Furen's chest lest she fainted from anger. Old Shen Furen laughed in anger. "Since it is like this, it seems that you are not truly repentant. From today onwards, you will move out of your courtyard and live in the Shen family's ancestral hall. Recite scriptures every day and see if your unruly temperament can be ground down. To live in the ancestral hall, one would have to face the ancestors' memorial tablets every day. For a delicate young lady, one feared that she would be scared out of her wits. Moreover, the ancestral hall was located in a cold place, and after staying for a few days, one might get sick." Old Shen Furen said those words in a fit of anger, and after finishing, there was a flash of pride in her eyes as she looked at Shen Miao, most likely waiting for Shen Miao to beg for mercy. But Shen Miao did not even frown and said, "Yes. This granddaughter will go back to pack up and immediately rush over." Chapter 125. That light sentence almost choked old Shen Furen to the point that she almost fainted. And after Shen Miao finished saying those words, she really said her goodbyes to old Shen Furen and left. This evil girl. He has no respect for the law. Old Shen Furen was flustered, and because of her lowly birth, she could not say any genteel words and actually scolded, "Little slut." As expected of that old bitch's blood. The old slut that she mentioned was naturally Shen Xian's biological mother, Shen Miao's biological grandmother. Ren Wanyun raised her head and looked out of the door. Shen Miao's figure had long disappeared. "Did you not say that she would definitely agree to this matter?" Old Shen Furen pointed the spearhead at Ren Wanyun. "How is it agreeing to her appearance? What should we do next?" Not only old Shen Furen was puzzled, even Ren Wanyun felt it was strange in her heart. With Wei Qian's conditions, even Shen Qing would find it hard to not be swayed, but Shen Miao actually flatly refused without even thinking about it. She muttered, "It must be that she is still concerned about Prince Ding," and pretended not to care on the surface but had not given up. Otherwise, she wouldn't have rejected such a family. She didn't even feel shy when a girl heard about her own marriage. Then what to do now? Old Shen Furen said in a bad mood, "If she does not relent on this side, how to write a letter to Shen Xian?" In their original plan, they only needed to coax Shen Miao and let Shen Miao reveal that she had a sweetheart in her letter to Shen Xian. After that, before Shen Xian returned to the capital, the marriage was arranged. The leopard cat changed the crown prince, and the brides of the 2 households changed positions. Afterwards, all the mistakes would be thrown onto Shen Miao alone. Once a female married, their temperament would be gone, and Shen Miao would be afraid in her heart, so she would not carelessly speak about it. Shen Xian would not know that Shen Miao and Shen Qing had exchanged marriage and thought that Shen Miao admired the young master of the Huang family. Huang Dexing liked men. Other than those close to the Huang family, no one else knew about this. From the outside, Huang Dexing seemed like a good man. But now Shen Miao had shown her dissatisfaction with the Wei family's marriage, not to mention writing a letter to Shen Xian. If Shen Miao herself did not agree, then many of the plans would not be able to be played and there would be a lot of trouble. Since the soft approach won't work, I'll use the hard approach. Ren Wanyun said fiercely, "Didn't mother lock her up in the ancestral hall? Then we can say whatever we want about the matters outside. In short, We must settle this marriage as soon as possible and get married as soon as possible so that Qing can be replaced. Otherwise, even if the wedding night could be coaxed, Shen Qing's stomach would not be able to be coaxed. Since Shen Qing couldn't see anything, he had to finish it quickly. Old Shen Furen looked at Ren Wanyun and did not speak. Although she also wanted the first household to be unlucky, if she really used force and was discovered by Shen Xian, she would not be able to bear the consequences. With one look, Ren Wanyun knew what old Shen Furen was thinking about. She gritted her teeth and said, "Mother, do not worry, I will make arrangements after this. Anyway, they won't be able to trace it back to mother." Since the words were said to this point, old Shen Furen no longer put up a front and said, "Then do as you say." In the 100-flower tower, the music was lingering and there was a tall pavilion. A handsome youth was casually dressed in purple, as if there was a faint light from the 9 heavens. His eyelashes were extremely long and his pair of peach blossom eyes were extremely beautiful, but when he looked at people, there was a faintly discernible coldness and cruelty. Kuh! A light cough broke the silence in the pavilion. The well-dressed gentleman placed his folding fan in front of his chest and made a gesture of asking for mercy. "Apologies for being late. You also know how to be late. Really fresh." The purple-clad youth glanced at him. Su Mingfeng touched his nose. This good friend hated not being punctual, and it was fortunate that he had a deep friendship with him. If it was other people, one feared that Xie Jingxing would have brushed his sleeves and would not wait for an incense stick of time. It is really that Wei Qian is not his usual self today. Su Mingfeng smiled bitterly. "You also know the young master of the assistant minister of the Secretariat's family. He is also quite pitiful. He already had a young lady in his heart, but the family brought up another young lady's marriage because of him. The other party even accepted his birthday invitation, so one feared that this marriage would be settled soon. Wei Qian's heart was not in a good mood, so he pulled me to drink, but..." Su Mingfeng pointed to himself. "I am currently seriously ill and cannot drink, so I could only persuade for an hour." "Boring," Xie Jingxing said with a cold face. It was obvious that Su Mingfeng spent so much time to do such a boring thing and was late for a long time, which made him very unhappy. Su Mingfeng felt helpless in his heart. Xie Jingxing looked cynical and always had a smile on his face, but in fact his heart was very vengeful and was especially picky. One did not know what was not going well these few days, as his expression was also so indifferent. As long as Xie Jingxing looked at people calmly, Su Mingfeng would feel goosebumps all over his body. Actually, Wei Qian was really unlucky. The wife that the family picked for him was not good, but she was an idiot. Previously everyone in Mingqi knew that she chased after Empress Ding, so Wei Qian naturally had no choice but to marry her. He quickly tried to find a topic of conversation, hoping to arouse Xie Jingxing's interest. "You should know who she is, right? Shen Xian's daughter, Shen Miao. To be able to marry Wei Qian, it should be considered as a great fortune." "You say?" Xie Jingxing suddenly opened his mouth and slowly asked, "Shen Miao?" Chapter 126. Shen Miao. Correct. Su Mingfeng was somewhat surprised by Xie Jingxing's attitude and suddenly thought of something before smiling mischievously. "Isn't that the young lady that you saved at the academy examinations? Speaking of which, she has some courage and is not too ugly." Wei Qian, this brat, is obviously one who does not know how fortunate he is. He saw Xie Jingxing in deep thoughts and could not help but be surprised. "Hey, could it be that you really fancy that young lady?" Xie Jingxing sneered and swept a cold glance at Su Mingfeng. "You are very idle." "Of course I am idle." Su Mingfeng frowned. "I am currently seriously ill and cannot attend court, so I spend all day in the residence playing with cats and dogs. You do not appear often recently and are very close to that physician Gao Yang. Are you hiding something from me?" If one were to say that their friendship was not shallow when they were young, but as they grew up, Xie Jingxing became more mysterious. Even though he was reminded about the matter of the Su family, sometimes Su Mingfeng felt that he knew nothing about Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing threw a fruit to him. "Eat yours." It was obvious that he did not intend to continue this topic. Su Mingfeng's eyes flashed and his lips revealed a bitter smile, but he did not say anything. Not long after the Shen family received the Wei family's Gung invitation, Ren Wanyan also let Xiang Lan invite Shen Gui to Kai Yin Yuan. Ever since Shen Qing's matter, there was a rift between Shen Gui and Ren Wanyan, and both of them did not speak much. These days their relationship was as cold as ice. This time it was Ren Wanyan who took the initiative to admit defeat. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju greeted Shen Gui, who came in, and Ren Wanyan sat in front of the table with some melancholy in her eyes. "What is the matter with you again?" Shen Gui's tone was still very stiff. In the beginning, because of Shen Qing, Ren Wanyan scolded him for being heartless, which made Shen Gui extremely unhappy. Even though he appreciated that Ren Wanyan was able to manage the internal and external matters well, but he was not a broad-minded person, not to mention that he was scolded by his own wife like a shrew. "Master is here." Ren Wanyan lazily glanced at him and her face was very haggard. She had always been astute and high-spirited and never had such an appearance. Shen Gui's heart softened when he saw this scene. Knowing that Ren Wanyan doted on Shen Qing, these days she had put in a lot of effort because of Shen Qing. After all, she was his wife and face must be given. He then berated Xiang Lan and Kai Ju, "Why is Furen so haggard? How did you all take care of master?" Ren Wanyan also heard the gentleness in Shen Gui's tone and her heart was delighted. She held her forehead and admitted defeat. "It is not related to them. It is me who is worried about Qing'er. These days, I haven't been able to eat well and I can't sleep well at night. My heart is very sad. Since Qing'er's matter has already happened, it is useless to think more about it. It is better for you to recuperate your body, as the residence still needs you to manage the household." Shen Gui looked at Ren Wanyan. Previously it was Ren Wanyan who managed the household, so naturally there were many conveniences for him. He used the Zhonggong's money to give gifts, and Ren Wanyan was also able to handle the accounts so that no mistakes could be found. Now that Ren Wanyan had to take care of Shen Qing, Chen Roqiu was temporarily taking over the management of the family. Naturally, it was not as convenient as before to handle matters. And those advantages were all taken by the third household, thus Shen Gui was not happy in his heart. Ren Wanyan clenched her teeth. Shen Gui was only thinking about his official career and did not care about Shen Qing at all. She said, "I also think so, but Qing'er's body cannot be separated from others and I am worried. So it is better to marry her to the Huang family." When Shen Gui mentioned the matter, his gentle tone became stiff again. "A woman's view is that hair is long but knowledge is short. Qing'er's current situation, it is better to find a good family to marry. The Huang family has a big business and Qing'er would be the legal wife, but you do not agree." Chapter 127. Ren Wanyan sneered in her heart. As a father, Shen Gui was really ruthless. Huang Dexing was such a person, and yet Shen Gui was able to say such words about a good family. Even though she already knew that the person beside her pillow was a cold person who prioritized benefits, but now thinking about it, Ren Wanyan still felt a chill. But at this moment was not the time for her to think about it. She wiped her eyes and said, "Master is right. It was me who thought wrongly, and it was me who stayed in the inner courtyard all day and could not see such big matters. The family that Master picked is naturally the best. I was initially not willing for Qing'er to marry over, but now feel that this is not necessarily a bad thing for Qing'er." Shen Gui was first surprised for a moment before looking at her incredulously. "You agree?" Ren Wanyan valued Shen Qing more than anything else, so how could she easily agree to this marriage? One had to know that Huang Dexing was interested in males. "Yes." A sorrowful expression appeared on Ren Wanyan's face. With Qing'er's current appearance, which good family would want her in the future? I thought about it and only felt that the Huang family was not bad. At least after marrying over, Qing'er would not lack clothes and food. If she really does not live well, that is also her fate. Finishing, she pulled her sleeves and cried softly. Seeing Ren Wanyan like this, Shen Gui's heart was at ease and somewhat believed in Ren Wanyan's words. Now Shen Qing was no longer a virgin and the Huang family only needed a daughter to sit on the position of young Huang Furen to deceive the eyes of the world. If Shen Qing married to Huang Dexing, she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life, and it was considered the best ending. Even though as a woman, she might not be able to achieve a perfect relationship in her entire life, but after that kind of thing happened, who would want her? Thinking of this, Shen Gui sighed and walked to Ren Wanyun's side before patting her back and comforting her. It is good that you have thought it through. Qing'er is after all my daughter and I will not harm her. Huang Darren and I have some friendship, so I will let him take care of Qing'er. If Qing'er marries over, she would definitely not suffer grievances. Ren Wanyun's heart was filled with disdain for Shen Gui's pompous speech, but on the surface there was a look of reliance. Then trouble master to mention to Huang Darren, and let the Huang family send people over to exchange for the Gung invitation. So fast? Shen Gui was somewhat surprised. Now that Qing'er is in such a state, how can we delay? Ren Wanyun sighed. The longer it drags on, one fear that others will find some clues. After all, Qing'er had not gone out for a long time. Marrying into the Huang family would at least be able to cover up a little. Moreover, Ren Wanyun caressed her chest. A long night is fraught with dreams. Ever since Qing'er's accident, I am always afraid. Seeing her palpitating appearance, Shen Gui pondered for a moment before saying, what you said is reasonable. Qing'er's matter cannot be dragged on. As such, I will write a letter to Lord Huang to mention this matter. If the Gung card is exchanged, it is not impossible to discuss the date. Everything depends on Master. Ren Wanyun said meekly. Shen Gui said a few more words before leaving in satisfaction. Today Ren Wanyun was submissive, admitted her mistake and did what he said, which made his heart feel much better. The haze of the past few days was swept away and his steps seemed to be filled with success. After Shen Gui left Kai Yin Yuan, Xiang Lan closed the door outside before speaking in a panic. Furen, is it really good to hide this matter from Master? Ren Wanyun let Shen Gui think that Shen Qing was really willing to marry Huang Dexing but did not tell her that Shen Qing and Shen Miao had the intention to change the marriage. As such, Shen Qing would be married to the genuine virtuous Wei Qian and Shen Miao would be married to the licentious Huang Dexing. Naturally this matter could not be known by Shen Gui. No matter what the ending was, for a person like Shen Gui, as long as it could implicate his career, he would not take the risk. But Ren Wanyun could not let her daughter step into the fire pit.